Tanya Robinson stood outside Ridgewood Academy's office, sweat rolling down her back, as white parents walked past her straight inside. 2 hours ignored, humiliated, while her son Malik, one of the brightest students in the school, waited to hear his future. And when the door finally opened, Principal Whitman looked at her with a smirk and whispered, "This school isn't built for children like Malik." But what happened next, no one in that room was ready for. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning sun bore down with a sharp brightness that made the glass walls of Ridgewood Academy gleam like polished crystal. Parents streamed in and out of the front doors, their polished shoes clicking against the marble steps. The building itself seemed to radiate wealth, ivy creeping across its stone face, manicured lawns stretching endlessly, and banners displaying its Latin motto as though the school were a sacred institution. Tanya Robinson tightened her grip on the strap of her purse as she approached the entrance. She had taken the morning off from her job at the nursing home, swapping shifts with another aide just to be here. Her son, Malik, had been invited for a meeting about his academic placement. For Tanya, this moment felt like a doorway into the future, an opportunity for her son to rise above the struggles she had endured her whole life. But as she reached the front desk, the secretary didn't smile. She simply scanned Tanya up and down, her eyes pausing at the worn edges of Tanya's handbag and the slightly faded hem of her blouse. "Name," the secretary asked curtly, not bothering to lift her head fully from the computer. "Tanya Robinson. I'm here to meet Principal Whitman. 10 o'clock appointment." Tanya's voice was polite, steady. She wanted to come across as professional, as prepared as any other parent. The secretary clicked her tongue, then looked at a paper list. "You'll have to wait. Principal Whitman is very busy this morning." "That's fine," Tanya said softly, though her chest tightened. She turned toward the benches placed outside the office. They weren't in the lobby, but just beyond the double glass doors outside, where the morning sun had already begun to scorch. "Excuse me, ma'am," Tanya asked gently. "Is it all right if I wait inside here in the shade? It's quite hot out there." The secretary's eyes barely flicked upward. "We don't usually allow parents to wait in the lobby. Policy. Please step outside." Tanya swallowed her protest. With a small nod, she pushed open the doors and stepped onto the stone patio, the air instantly heavier with heat. She sat down, trying to compose herself, but a voice inside her whispered, would she have told one of those other parents to sit outside? Minutes passed slowly, each one sticky and oppressive. Tanya smoothed her skirt, pulled out her phone to check the time, then put it away. She didn't want to seem impatient. She reminded herself, this is for Malik. Every discomfort is worth it. The door opened again. A white couple walked briskly toward the office. The father in a tailored suit, the mother in a silk blouse. The secretary smiled as they entered, gesturing them in without hesitation. Tanya's stomach twisted. She had arrived long before them. From her bench, Tanya watched more families come and go. Every time, the pattern repeated. Polite greetings, welcoming gestures, swift entry into the air-conditioned office. And every time, she remained outside, sweating under the sun, invisible. Her thoughts turned to Malik, her gentle boy just 11 years old, who loved to build tiny bridges out of toothpicks and glue. He was always sketching designs in his notebooks, pages filled with circuits and structures that seemed too advanced for his age. He dreamed of becoming an engineer, of creating things that made life better. Tanya carried those dreams like treasures in her heart, guarding them against a world that often tried to snatch such treasures away. But now, sitting on that bench, she felt the familiar sting, the reminder that no matter how brilliant Malik was, the world might already have decided who he was allowed to become. Another hour passed. Tanya dabbed her forehead with a tissue, her blouse clinging to her back. The secretary had not looked her way once. Tanya tried to remind herself of what her mother used to say, patience is a kind of strength. But her patience was unraveling. She felt humiliated, paraded outside like an afterthought while others walked freely in. Finally, after nearly 90 minutes, Tanya stood and approached the doors again. She pushed them open, stepping into the cool air of the lobby. "Excuse me," she said, keeping her voice steady, though her throat felt tight. "I had a 10 o'clock appointment with Principal Whitman. It's almost 11:30 now." The secretary pursed her lips. "Oh, right. One moment." She tapped a few keys, then lifted the phone. "Yes, Principal Whitman. The Robinsons are here. Should I send her in?" "Yes. Right away." The woman hung up and motioned with 2 fingers, You may go in now. No apology. No acknowledgement of the 2 hours Tanya had spent waiting outside. Just cold efficiency. Tanya straightened her shoulders, walked down the corridor, and approached the large oak door with the brass nameplate. Edward Whitman, Principal. She paused for a moment, breathing deeply. She told herself she would not let the sting of the wait weaken her resolve. She was here for Malik, and nothing else mattered. She pushed the door open. Inside, the office was grand, bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, diplomas covering the walls, a massive desk polished to a shine. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting the room in a golden glow that only heightened its air of authority. Behind the desk sat Principal Whitman, a man in his late 50s with neatly combed silver hair and a sharp suit. He didn't stand to greet her. He didn't offer his hand. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as they settled on Tanya. In that look, just a glance, Tanya read it all. The dismissal, the judgment, the unspoken message that she didn't belong here, that she had wasted his time, that she was nothing more than an inconvenience in his carefully ordered world. Her heart sank, but her chin lifted. She met his gaze, refusing to look away. And before he spoke a single word, Tanya already knew this meeting would be a battle. Whitman leaned forward, lips parting as if to speak, and the first words out of his mouth would decide everything. Whitman let the silence stretch, as if allowing the room itself to prejudge the woman who had dared to cross its threshold. Then he folded his hands with performative patience. "Mrs. Robinson, thank you for waiting," he said, the thanks flattened by a tone that made it sound like a reprimand. "We run a very tight schedule. I trust the lobby staff made our policies clear." He tilted his head toward the window, toward the heat she had just escaped, as if the sun were an extension of his rules. Tanya offered a measured nod. "I was here at 10. We're grateful for your time." The word "we" carried Malik's weight. She set it gently on the desk between them. Whitman's gaze floated across the certificates on his wall, as if drawing authority from the gold seals. "Ridgewood is a partner to families who partner with us," he said. "That means understanding how we do things. Our culture is particular, intentional." He pronounced culture like a password. Tanya didn't know. She kept her voice even. "I'm here to learn what Malik needs to do to thrive." Whitman allowed himself the smallest smile. Thrive. Yes, that's what every parent wants. But wanting and fitting are not the same. The secretary's phone buzzed faintly through the wall. Whitman didn't flinch. He slid a slim folder from the corner of his desk and tapped it. "I've reviewed Malik's file. Bright boy on paper. Testing suggests aptitude in quantitative reasoning. But we don't enroll numbers. We enroll children who can embody Ridgewood standards day in and day out." He steepled his fingers. "Sometimes families misunderstand what that looks like." A slow heat moved up Tanya's neck. "Malik loves learning. He's respectful. He's never had discipline issues." Whitman's brows lifted. "Respectful is contextual." Tanya leaned forward, despite herself. "Context here being what?" He glanced at her blouse, at her purse. "The small details of a careful life. Our community is accustomed to a certain comportment. Families engage through our liaison, attend teas and forums, connect with legacy mentors. They understand how to present their children for success." The word present landed heavy. "We sent emails," Tanya said quietly. "I didn't get a response." Whitman nodded, as if that settled it. "Our inboxes are busy. Most parents follow up through the parent guild. They know how to get things done." He opened the folder. On top lay a printout of test scores. Tanya recognized. She had stayed up late confirming each percentile. He flicked it with a fingernail. "Interesting spikes," he murmured. "Anomalies, even. Standardized metrics that jump in one sitting raise flags on our side." Tanya felt the chair steady teety her. "He's been studying every night. He built mock exams for himself. He's earnest." Whitman shrugged. "Earnestness doesn't always align with integrity. Our system flagged the last assessment for irregularities. Timing patterns that usually indicate assistance." The word hung like a stain. Tanya's mouth opened before she could stop it. "Are you suggesting my son cheated?" Whitman spread his hands. "I'm not suggesting. I'm observing patterns. We must protect the integrity of Ridgewood." She thought of Malik bent over his notebook, whispering equations to himself, tracing circuits, until the page smudged. "He didn't cheat," she said, each word a plank laid across open water. "He's gifted in math. He's been building bridges out of toothpicks since second grade. Whitman's smile returned, lighter this time. We see quite a lot of gifted children when admission season comes. Many are guided extensively. Coaches, tutors, consultancies that specialize in strategic presentation. The implications scraped at her. We don't have a consultancy, she said. We have a kitchen table. He works there. Whitman's eyes softened in something approaching pity. Pity can be crueler than disdain. And I respect that, he said in a way that conveyed he didn't. He slid another page forward. Teacher notes from the shadow day in our lab. It seems Malik asserted himself. He skimmed. He redirected a peer's experiment, commandeered equipment, and this part is concerning, made a remark that another student perceived as aggressive. Tanya blinked. Aggressive? Whitman offered a sympathetic tilt. The peer felt unsettled. Tanya pictured her son's hands hovering over wires and batteries, that narrow beam of focus he falls into. What was the remark? She asked. Whitman checked the margin. If you let me, I can fix this. He looked up. To some students that can come off as domineering. This is a collaborative environment. Tanya steadied herself. Or it can come off as a child offering help. Whitman nodded as if they were discussing a hypothetical, intent versus impact. We teach our students to be mindful. A pulse beat in Tanya's jaw. Who was the peer? He cleared his throat. Aiden Parkhurst. His family is. He let the rest float. Confident she could complete the sentence with donors. Legacy. Power. Aiden's report suggests Malik disrupted the menstruation. Tanya heard something crack silently in the space between truth and narrative. Did anyone ask Malik what happened? She said. We collected observations from the adults present, Whitman replied. Efficient. We do value faculty perspective. She inhaled through her nose. You value it more than Malik's. He didn't deny it. We must trust our team. He closed the folder halfway, signaling a turn toward conclusion. There are programs that might suit Malik better. Our general track, for instance, emphasis on character, team spirit. There's a robust athletic pathway. Many boys like him find their stride there. The phrase boys like him slid across the desk like ice. Tanya's voice thinned. Boys like him? Whitman nodded pleasantly. Active, energetic, hands-on. We see them bloom when we lean into their strengths. She thought of all the times Malik had been told to pick up a ball instead of a book. He wants engineering, she said. He's not here to bloom on your timeline. He's here to be challenged. Whitman clasped his hands. Challenge is effective when a child feels he belongs. Belonging requires an ease with our environment. Some children spend all their energy trying to translate unspoken codes. That is not humane. He said humane like he was offering mercy. Tanya felt it like an indictment. Are we being measured by codes you refuse to name? She asked. No, he said. We're measured by outcomes. Our alumni list is our covenant. We preserve it. He pushed the folder toward her, as if granting a favor. She reached for it, but his palm landed on the cardboard edge. These materials can't leave the office, he said. Policy. She drew her hands back slowly. Then I'd like to read them here. Whitman sighed, the sound of a door closing. I don't think we should go line by line. The gestalt is clear. He used big words like a velvet rope. Malik's scores are bright but inconsistent. Behavioral notes suggest friction. Parent engagement is intermittent. His eyes flicked again to her blouse, to the heat-limp hair at her temples. Presentation matters. Tanya straightened, heat rising that had nothing to do with the sun. I missed 2 guild teas because I work mornings in a nursing home, she said. I sleep 4 hours to get him to his early sessions. If that counts as intermittent, perhaps your definition of engagement needs rewriting. Whitman's lips pursed, not at the content but at the tone. We are all making sacrifices, he said evenly. Ridgewood is not simply a school. It is a community with expectations. Parents who thrive here understand how to modulate, how to advocate gracefully. The word gracefully slid across her skin like sandpaper. Grace looks different when you're tired, Tanya said. Grace is showing up after a double shift and asking what else your child can do. She nodded toward the folder. May I at least see the flagged data? If there's an irregularity, I want to understand it. Whitman tapped the page. The algorithm doesn't lie. It detects patterns. There's nothing to debate. She felt a tremor of rage under her ribs and tamped it down. Algorithms are built by people, she said softly. People with assumptions. Sometimes those assumptions punish children who don't test like your norm. His expression didn't change, but something cooled. Mrs. Robinson, this is drifting into a space that doesn't help Malik. She leaned back, forcing composure. Then help him, she said. Tell me what specific steps keep him on the advanced track. Whitman considered, savoring the power of prescription. He would need endorsement from at least 2 faculty in core subjects, a clean conduct note from the lab, and demonstration of community readiness. Visible parent participation. Tanya offered her chin. We have Ms. Alvarez from math. She wrote to us. Whitman's eyelid flickered. Ms. Alvarez is new. Her grading curve is generous. A quiet twist tugged through Tanya's chest. If even help inside the building could be dismissed, what counted as proof? The office clock ticked with officious precision. We're not an experiment, Tanya said. We're a family trying to do right by a child who has earned his shot. Whitman stood, smoothing his jacket. The meeting was ending, whether they were finished or not. The question is not what he has earned, he said, circling to the door as if shepherding a guest. It's where he will flourish without destabilizing peers who have different needs. Tanya rose too, refusing the choreography of dismissal. Different needs, like legacies and donors, she said. Different needs, like never having to think about whether you belong. He rested his hand on the doorknob and turned back, the light angling across his face, carving the practiced calm of a man who had never been forced to translate himself. Belonging is not a dirty word here, he said. It's a covenant we protect. She met his gaze and didn't blink. Protect from whom? The question hung in the space, naked and precise. For a heartbeat even the clock seemed to hush. He considered. Then with the faintest tightening around his eyes, he chose his answer, honed over years of meetings like this. This school isn't built for children like Malik. The date at the bottom of the letter pulsed like a warning light, stamped 10 minutes before Whitman's meeting, before Tanya had even walked into his office. She kept her voice calm for Malik's sake, but her hands trembled along the crease of the paper. This isn't a sentence, she said, folding it once, then twice, as if she could make the words smaller. It's a mistake, and mistakes can be fixed. Malik nodded, but his eyes moved as if they were looking for a place to set down the weight of being called average. Do I have to move classes? He asked. The steadiness in his voice made her ache. Tomorrow we'll talk to the counselor, Tanya said. We'll ask questions. We'll get the right answers. It sounded like a plan, because plans were how she kept fear from flooding the room. Morning brought the kind of pale light that made everything look honest. Tiles, faces, the mirror she avoided, for a second longer than usual. On the drive, Malik sat with his sketchbook closed in his lap, thumb tracing the spiral binding. The school gates opened with their usual effortless welcome for cars that bore names with silent letters. Tanya walked him to the office, because some mornings you don't let your child go into a building alone. The guidance counselor, Ms. Nolan, met them with a smile that landed just short of sincere. Mrs. Robinson, she said, extending a hand. We've been expecting you. Tanya noticed the file already on the desk. Expecting, pre-writing, pre-deciding. We received a placement letter yesterday, Tanya said, taking a seat. There's an error. Ms. Nolan's smile didn't change. There's been a placement, she corrected gently. Our system looks at many factors. Then let me see all of them, Tanya replied. Scores, notes, anything that says he belongs in average. She hated the word in her mouth, as if saying it could make it true. Miss Nolan opened the file and slid a sheet across. The page was a neat grid, squares filled with numbers and coded phrases. Quantitative aptitude, high collaborative readiness, emerging, community fit, unverified. The last line held like a footnote that controlled the whole document. Recommendation, general learning cohort. His quantitative is high, Tanya said. Why would he be anywhere but the advanced track? Because we placed the whole child, Ms. Nolan said. We've noticed Malik gets distracted by outside interests. Like what? Tanya asked. Miss Nolan glanced at Malik, then back at Tanya. He's very energetic. He responds to physical outlets. The general cohort integrates athletics more seamlessly. Are you saying he should play more and think less? Tanya said, keeping her tone level, because she knew they were measuring it. No, Miss Nolan said, as if surprised by the suggestion she'd just made. I'm saying some students thrive when they lean into their strengths. There's a basketball skills unit starting next week. He might really shine there. Malik stared at his shoelaces. I like building stuff, he said, so softly it almost missed the room. I don't want to be in a class where we don't build things. Ms. Nolan arranged her features into a comforting shape. You'll still build, sweetheart, just in a way that's appropriate for where you are. And where is that? Tanya said. Finding his lane, Miss Nolan replied. It's not a door closing, it's a path opening. The words were polished, but they scraped going in. Tanya thanked her, because that is what you do. Then walked Malik down the hall to his new classroom door. On the whiteboard, someone had written "Welcome to General. We win together." The exclamation mark felt like too much. Inside, the desks were arranged in clusters, the walls cheerful with laminated slogans about grit. A boy dribbled an invisible ball with his palm against the desk. The teacher, Mr. Ellis, looked up with quick friendliness. Malik, right? He said, slapping the air between them, as if he might high-five a decision. Stoked to have you. I saw you in the gym last week. You've got bounce, kid. Malik nodded, uncomfortable in the sudden recognition. Tanya shook the teacher's hand. He's here for the math work too, she said. Absolutely, Mr. Ellis said. We're big on real-world math. Statistics, averages, game probabilities. He winked. He'll eat it up. Tanya kissed Malik's temple and left him in a room that promised to make him a team player. In the hallway, she stopped long enough to breathe and long enough to remember the way Whitman had said humane, like a mercy. Her phone vibrated. Kiana again. How's he holding up? Tanya typed. Placed average. Counselor pushed sports. 3 dots. Then of course they did. Document everything. Start a folder. She did. She opened a new note and titled it Ridgewood Receipts. The act steadied her. By lunch, stories began to gather like lint. Malik came home later than usual. His face set in a careful arrangement that would not worry his mother. How was it? Tanya asked, setting a plate in front of him. He shrugged. Okay, how? She pressed gently. In math, Mr. Ellis said, save the fancy thinking for later. When I tried to show a faster way to do the problem, he said. He told Dylan his way was precise. Mine was creative, but confusing to others. Tanya cut her chicken too hard. What about science? Malik's fork paused. We didn't do science today. We watched film of last year's field day. It was long. He breathed out a laugh that wasn't one. Coach Fairfax came in and told me I should try out for junior league. He said I've got, what did he say? Explosiveness. What did you say? Tanya asked. I said I like circuits. He smirked. The smallest rebellion. He said I'll like college coaches more. They ate, in a quiet that wasn't peaceful. After dishes, Malik opened his sketchbook, and Tanya watched him design a bridge more complex than any she'd seen him attempt, load-bearing points mapped like arguments. She snapped a photo because sometimes evidence looks like art. The next day, Tanya arranged to drop by classes. Ms. Nolan frowned at the request, then allowed it. We value parent engagement, she said, as if the phrase could erase the last 24 hours. In English, Tanya stood near the shelves and watched. The lesson was on persuasive writing. A girl raised her hand and said, we should have longer lunch because we need energy, and the teacher, Miss Harper, praised the confidence. Malik raised his and said, we should have longer lab blocks because experiments take time, and Miss Harper said, let's focus on arguments everyone can relate to. Tanya took a note. In the margin, she wrote, relatability, majority experience. In math, Malik solved a problem in his notebook using variables beyond the lesson. Mr. Ellis scanned the room and stopped at Malik's desk. Good initiative, he said loudly, but we need to stick to basics so no one gets left behind. There's a column for challenge problems on the board, Malik said. Can I write this there? Mr. Ellis paused, then gave him a smile that was more management than approval. Why don't you help set up for the data collection instead? We'll need runners for the relay. He turned to the room. Everyone loves a runner, Tanya wrote. Leadership be running, not thinking. She fought the urge to walk out with her son under her arm, the primal motion of mothers who've seen enough. On her way to the main office, she passed a bulletin board she hadn't noticed before. A new poster dangled slightly crooked. Big block letters read Ridgewood celebrates student athletes, diversity in motion. In the photos, kids jumped and posed in well-lit gyms. In the bottom corner, there was Malik caught mid-sprint from the fun run 2 weeks ago. Legs a blur, face set with the same focus he wore for calculus videos. The caption beneath the collage, finding their lanes. No one had asked for her consent to use his image. She felt her pulse in her throat. "Excuse me," she said to the receptionist. "Who approves these?" "The Guild Communications Chair," the woman said, not looking up from her screen. "Great, right?" "It's not great," Tanya said. "It's my son." The receptionist glanced up now. "It's positive exposure," she said, a defensive edge creeping into her politeness. "It shows opportunity. It shows him where you want to see him," Tanya replied. "Not where he wants to be." She photographed the poster because memory can be argued with. Images cannot. In the late afternoon, Tanya met briefly with Miss Alvarez in the math wing, catching her at the end of lunch. Miss Alvarez was slight, hair pulled into a practical bun, eyes that registered both fatigue and fight. "I've seen Malik's work," she said in a low voice, leading Tanya into an empty classroom. "He is not average." "I need more than belief," Tanya said. "I need paper." Mrs. Alvarez hesitated. "I'm new," she admitted. "There are currents I'm still mapping. But I can tell you this. On the district benchmark, Malik's raw score puts him top 5%. The inconsistency flagged by the system. It's a timing variance because he spent extra minutes checking the last two answers. That pattern gets misread as external help," she grimaced. "It shouldn't." Tanya swallowed, a small rush of relief and fury mixing. "Can you share that?" she asked. "Officially? No," Miss Alvarez said. "But you can request the raw metrics. They have to give them if you ask in writing. Use the phrase 'in accordance with my rights under the Student Records Act.'" Tanya repeated it in her head. "Thank you," she said. "And please be careful." Ms. Alvarez's smile was quick. "You too." By the time dismissal rang, another story had found Malik. In the hallway, two boys slapped him on the back, as if they were entitled to his body. "You trying out?" one asked. "Coach says you're fast." Malik shrugged them off gently. "I'm building a bridge for the fair," he said. One of the boys faked confusion. "Like, out of paper?" The other laughed. "Bro, build us a win." Malik kept walking, and Tanya, watching from the doors, watched her son do the calculus of dignity. How much to ignore, how much to correct, how to keep moving without becoming a story they would tell instead of him. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, with a pen and a yellow legal pad. Because form letters felt more serious on legal pads. She wrote, "To whom it may concern, I am requesting the complete set of raw assessment data for my son Malik Robinson, including timestamps, keystroke logs, scoring rubrics, and any algorithmic flags, in accordance with my rights under the Student Records Act. Please also provide copies of all placement notes and communications referencing his cohort." She kept her sentences short and her verbs demanding. She printed the letter at Kiana's place because her own printer refused to pretend. "You're doing this smart," Kiana said, feeding paper into the tray. "They count on us being too tired to be precise." Tanya smiled without humor. "I'm tired and I'm precise." On the way home, she stopped by a dollar store for a small, hardbound notebook, the kind detectives carry in television shows. At the register, the clerk rang it up and said, "You starting a diary?" "Something like that," Tanya said. "A log." Back at the apartment, Malik had spread textbooks and toothpicks across the coffee table, building a truss that could hold a stack of pennies. "Look," he said, eyes bright again, as the structure held more than seemed possible. Tanya knelt to eye level with the tiny architecture. "What do triangles say?" she asked.
"They say the weight's not going to crack us," he replied.
Automatic and sure. She reached for his hand. "That's right." When he was in bed, she opened the notebook and wrote Ridgewood log day 1. Under it she listed times, names, phrases that needed remembering. Focus on sports. Save the fancy thinking. Appropriate for where you are. Poster without consent. Then, in the margin, she wrote a sentence she had been avoiding all day and didn't know she needed to see. "He is not average." Her father's voice arrived the way memory does. Unannounced and exact. "They'll always try to limit what you can be. Tanya girl. Not just you. The ones who come after you. The trick is to make their limits visible. Once you name a wall, it stops being a horizon." He had said it at their kitchen table the week a teacher told her to tone down her answers, because other kids might feel left behind. She'd been 12, her throat hot with shame, and he had placed a ruler upright on the table and said, "This is their measure. Now watch." Then he'd laid it flat and used it to draw a line forward. "Now it's yours." Tanya closed her eyes and let herself miss him, just for a breath. When she opened them, resolve had settled into a plan. She drafted the email to records. She cued it to send in the morning, because she had learned that emails sent at 8:01 a.m. get answered differently than those sent at 10. She gathered the screenshots into a folder on her desktop and backed them up to the cloud because paper can disappear, and so can files, when you're not the one who controls the server. Her phone buzzed with a school-wide notification. Tomorrow, Spirit Assembly, celebrating our student athletes. The irony pushed a bitter laugh to the surface and back down again. She set her phone face down, then changed her mind and set it face up. If anyone called, she wanted to hear it ring. At the bottom of the letter from the night before, she wrote a new line in blue ink. Received without consent, dated before meeting, contested. She slipped it into a plastic sleeve. Evidence does better when it looks like evidence. In the quiet of the living room, she picked up the notebook again. The next page she titled, Questions to Ask Without Warning. She listed them one by one. Who changed the cohort? Who approved the poster? Why is collaboration being used to reroute leadership? Where is the raw score report? What is community fit in metrics? She capped the pen and let her hand rest on the cover. Then she did one more thing. She opened the voice memo app and created a new file. Ridgewood log. Audio. The red circle blinked, waiting for a decision. Tanya took a breath that reached her back and pressed record. Day 1, she said quietly, eyes on her son's sleeping doorway. We begin. A notification slid across the top of her screen at the same instant. The school's social feed had posted the Diversity in Motion poster to its public page. Malik's sprinting face, framed by a caption about finding their lanes, began collecting hearts in real time. Tanya's jaw set. The record light glowed steady. She made her decision to gather everything, quietly, relentlessly, and as she did, her phone vibrated again, with a new private message from an unknown number. If you're keeping receipts, start with Lab 2B tomorrow. They're changing the rubric at 7:30 a.m. The words hung in the air, like a verdict. This school isn't built for children like Malik. Tanya walked out of Whitman's office with the folder's shadow still on her hands, even though he'd refused to let it leave his desk. The hallway felt colder than it had been when she arrived, the kind of cold that came from ceilings too high and rules too old. The receptionist didn't meet her eyes. No one did. Tanya pushed through the glass doors back into the heat, and the sudden sun made her blink hard, as if she might blink away the sentence he'd pronounced. On the steps she paused and gripped the railing. The world below went on, as if nothing had happened. Students in crisp uniforms jogged between buildings. A mother laughed into her phone. A cluster of boys compared sneakers, their laughter ricocheting. Tanya's mind replayed the tone Whitman used for culture and fit, the way he lifted humane like a silver lid. Dowd entered quietly, wearing politeness like a disguise. Was she protecting Malik by keeping him here, or feeding him to something that had already decided how to name him? She made it to her car, and rested her head against the steering wheel. The engine clicked in the heat, a reminder of bills and shifts, and meals planned so carefully the leftovers had jobs. She let herself feel the ache for a full minute, no more, because Malik would need her steady later. Her phone vibrated. A text from her neighbor. Kiana. How'd it go, Tanya? Stared at the bubble, thumbs hovering. She typed, deleted, typed again, then sent. He said Malik doesn't fit. 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared. Come to the Guild coffee today, Kiana sent. 2 p.m. I'll sit with you. It's mostly moms. It helps. Tanya almost laughed. The last time she'd tried a Guild event, she'd felt studied, like a form to be scanned. I'll try, she replied, though she didn't know where she would find the time or nerve. At the coffee shop near campus, the bell jingled with a cheerful insistence that felt at odds with the knot in her stomach. The parent guild had claimed the back room, a soft blur of linen scarves, monogrammed totes, and the low hum of strategized lives. Kiana waved her over, scooting a chair. Breathe, she murmured. Just breathe. Introductions skittered around the table. Caroline, Beth, Priya, and Emily there were probably 3 of, and Tanya nodded at each as though names could anchor her. A woman she didn't know leaned in with the practiced warmth of committees. So Tanya, how are you finding Ridgewood? Her smile held the exact calibration of curiosity and judgment. It's been a learning curve, Tanya said. She kept her voice light enough to pass inspection. We met with Mr. Whitman this morning about Malik's placement. A pause fell that wasn't an accident. Caroline stirred her tea. Placements can be complex, she said. Sometimes it takes a year for a child to find their lane. The word Lane landed like a wall. Kiana shifted beside Tanya, the wrinkle between her brows a private semaphore. My son, Isaiah, landed in general before anyone watched him do a single problem, Kiana said softly. By spring, he was reading the high-level math workbook after lights out. A mother across the table tilted her head, voice sugar-glazed. Well, lanes aren't judgments, they're about matching environments. Kiana's smile was thin. Funny how certain environments matched certain last names. Tanya sat very still. The room had turned slightly, angles changing in invisible ways. Another mom, older, spoke in a near whisper that asked to be trusted. There's a system here, an index almost. Legacy points, donor involvement, family engagement. It isn't written, of course, but you can feel it. Kids who fit rise faster. She lowered her eyes. My nephew is biracial. His mother had to fight for every inch. Tanya swallowed. How? The woman's fingers tightened around her cup. By collecting proof. Emails. Rubrics. Asking for everything in writing. And by understanding that when they say it's not personal, it's always personal. A laugh floated from the other end of the room. A mother recounted a teacher's email like a victory. Tanya felt outside the circle, and in the crosshairs at once. She thanked them, listened, tucked secrets away. The hush in their stories was not weakness. It was strategy honed by necessity. After the meeting, in the parking lot, a father approached her, his tie loosened, eyes sympathetic. My daughter's in 8th, he said. 3 years ago, she was borderline for advanced English. We pushed, got a second review, and surprised the rubric had participation style weighted heavier than comprehension. He held her gaze. She participates differently when she's not the only black girl in the room. Tanya nodded, feeling the rough edge of recognition. Do they ever admit it? The father smiled without joy. They'll call it climate, but they don't fix the thermostat. Tanya drove home on autopilot. The guild room's perfume and politeness lingering like humidity. A stoplight turned red, and she braked harder than she needed to. Her pulse thudded in her wrist. She pictured Malik, half lone in a lab full of shiny things, apologizing for his existence before being told he was too bold. Doubt had sprouted and threaded through her certainty, choking it in places. She turned onto their street, where the houses were close enough to hear each other's laughter and Sunday arguments. This neighborhood understood what it cost to keep getting back up. Inside their apartment, the afternoon light fell kind through the blinds, striping the couch where Malik's sketchbooks lived. Tanya poured water, sat, and opened the top one. Pages of bridges, each one more intricate than the last, arched across the paper. A note in the margin. Load distribution redesign. Triangles hold. She ran her finger along the pencil lines, careful not to smudge. Her phone buzzed again. An email from Ridgewood Parent Guild. Welcome portal. She tapped it open. Dear parent, thank you for your interest in the Ridgewood Parent Guild. Your account status pending review. To complete activation, please attend 2 introductory teas and schedule Legacy Mentor Coffee. Below a timestamp submitted 9:02 a.m. And another line, preliminary status passive. Tanya frowned. She hadn't submitted anything at 9:02 a.m. She'd been driving to the meeting. She clicked through and saw a comment field that made her breath hitch. Observed engagement, minimal. Parent unfamiliar with guild channels. The entry was timestamped 10 minutes before her appointment with Whitman. Her stomach dipped. How could a review feel pre-written? She clicked for more details, and found a log labeled placement readiness. Parent alignment. A green dot for financial forms submitted, a yellow for community fit unverified, and a red for legacy link. None. Next to community fit unverified, a note recommend general track pending reevaluation. The timestamp sat there like a bruise. 9:41 a.m. The meeting with Whitman had begun at 10. It was already in the system before she'd spoken a word. Tanya set the phone down. The room suddenly too small. She reminded herself to breathe, to catalog, to not let rage do the talking when evidence would do better. The door clicked softly as Malik returned from after school. His footsteps were light, the way they were when he tried not to interrupt her thoughts. Hey, Ma, he called, and the normalcy of it made her throat burn. She tucked the phone under a notepad and turned with a smile that felt like it might crack. Hey, baby, how was it? He shrugged, dropped his backpack and flopped onto the couch. We built a paper tower in advisory. Mine fell first. He grinned at himself, and then the grin faded when he studied her face. You okay? She sat beside him, smoothing his hair with her palm. Just tired, she said. It was true. and it didn't begin to cover it. Malik watched her hand, the way kids do when they pretend not to watch your eyes. Did I mess up at the lab? He asked quietly. I tried not to touch stuff unless they said. But Aiden was gonna short the circuit, so I told him not to. He got mad. Tanya felt the story land exactly where Whitman had placed it. Then tilt. You didn't mess up, she said. You saw something and you tried to help. Malik nodded, but uncertainty had already seeded itself. Some kids want you to let them break it so they can say it was your fault, he murmured. Mr. Barrow said I should hang back more. He inhaled. How do you hang back from being yourself? The question slipped under her ribs. Tanya swallowed and lifted his chin gently. You don't, she said. You learn when to step in so they can hear you. That takes practice. It doesn't mean you're wrong, he thought, then nodded, as if filing it under concepts to test. Is the principal mad at me, he asked. Tanya held his gaze. He doesn't know you yet. It was as honest as she could be. Then I should show him, Malik said, turning to grab a sketchbook. He opened to a new page and began a bridge, pencil moving quick, confident. Tanya watched the triangles appear, the lines distributing weight where it belonged, and she felt steadier. She moved to the kitchenette to start dinner. Rice, beans, the chicken she'd marinated last night, because planning comfort is a way of loving. The rhythm of washing and seasoning calmed her. Malik kept sketching, sometimes pausing to glance at his phone. She heard the buzz of a message come through from a number she didn't recognize. Saw him ignore it the way he always did during design time. His discipline made her smile. Her phone buzzed again too. This time it was Kiana. You okay? Remember to document. Screenshot everything. Tanya lifted the phone and snapped the guild portal screens, heart beating careful and loud. As dusk softened the room, the storm inside her quieted into a resolve that had steps. She would request copies of Malik's lab notes. She would ask for the raw test data. She would find an ally in the building who still believed schools could be places that made children more of themselves, not less. At that thought, her phone chimed once more. An email notification sliding across the top. Delivery status notification. Failure. Message to Edi Whitman. At Ridgewood could not be delivered. Tanya frowned. She hadn't emailed Whitman. She opened the notice and saw a thread she hadn't started. Her address was listed as the sender of a message. At 11:18 a.m. Subject line. Malik Robinson. General track confirmation. Her breath caught. The body preview read, as discussed, we accept the reassignment. The email had bounced back because the address was mistyped. She stared at it, mind assembling possibilities she didn't like. Someone had used her address, or the system had generated a note with her name. Either way, something had tried to fix her reply to yes. Tanya forwarded the bounce to herself, printed it to PDF, took another screenshot. Uncertainty gave way to a focused fear. Decisions were being made about her child without her consent, and somewhere a paper trail would say she had agreed. Ma, Malik called from the doorway. He'd changed into his home t-shirt, the one with faint glue stains from a bridge that had finally held. His expression was careful, like he was trying to carry two truths at once, wanting to be strong and wanting to be a kid. He held a folded sheet of paper in his hand, edges wrinkled from being gripped too hard on the walk home. Coach gave us something in homeroom, he said to give it to you. Tanya dried her hands on a dish towel and stepped toward him. His eyes flicked from her face to the paper and back. Did I do something wrong? He asked, voice smaller. She forced a smile that didn't belong to any version of this day. Let me see, she said softly. Malik handed her the paper. It was school letterhead, the Ridgewood crest stamped in navy at the top. Tanya unfolded it and read the first line, and the words widened inside her like a sudden drop. Performance group, average pending immediate placement. Her vision trembled at the edges. Her fingers tightened on the paper as Malik searched her face for the kind of truth that either breaks you or builds something harder. Before she could speak, she saw the signature at the bottom, dated that morning, 10 minutes before her meeting with Whitman. Tanya hardly slept after the anonymous message. Lab 2B, rubric changed at 7:30 a.m. It stayed with her, curling around her thoughts like smoke. Someone inside the school had noticed what she noticed. Someone who wanted her to see. She didn't know if that meant she had an ally or if it was a test. But she knew one thing. If Ridgewood had built walls to keep Malik boxed in, she was going to map every brick. She woke before dawn, brewed coffee so strong it made the air sharp, and laid out papers across the kitchen table. The yellow legal pad held notes in her father's voice. Name the wall. Then it stops being a horizon. Beside it, the plastic sleeve with the placement letter. She smoothed it with the flat of her hand, the way people do with photographs of the dead. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, and she would not allow the pieces to scatter. When Malik left for school, Tanya followed 10 minutes later, telling herself she was simply an engaged parent. But her real mission was clear. Watch, record, gather. She sat in the back of Lab 2B, under the polite pretense of volunteering. At precisely 7:32 a.m., Akkad's the whiteboard schedule was erased and rewritten. Yesterday's design challenge had become teen skills observing without intervening. The rubric Ms. Nolan had praised, quantitative, precise, measurable, was gone. In its place were categories so broad they could mean anything. Cooperation, patience, fit. She pulled out her phone, under the table, and snapped photos. A teacher noticed, frowning. Tanya smiled politely, tucking the phone away, but she already had what she needed. Later, in the logbook, she wrote, criteria shifted overnight. New language impossible to contest. Captured timestamp. The fight became her second job. Nights after Malik went to bed, Tanya sat at the table with folders open, like battle plans. She drafted emails in language so careful it could have been carved from stone. Respectful, firm, impossible to dismiss as angry. Please clarify the discrepancy between the benchmark scores and placement notes. Can you provide the definitions for terms such as community fit? In accordance with my rights under the Student Records Act, I request. She copied every reply, highlighting contradiction. When the school claimed Malik's scores showed inconsistencies, Tanya matched them with the district's raw numbers, circled the percentiles, and underlined them twice. Evidence, piece by piece. The more she pushed, the colder the air became. Whitman's replies, when he chose to write, grew shorter. Placement stands. See prior correspondence. Policy is clear. Teachers who had once greeted her with cautious politeness now tightened their faces when she entered the room. Invitations to parent-teacher events reached her inbox hours later than others. A woman at the front desk once handed her a flyer with the wrong date for Malik's showcase. She found out only when Kiana texted her a photo of the program already underway. At the next PTA meeting, Tanya slid into a folding chair near the back, notebook balanced on her lap. The room buzzed with voices, fundraising goals, spirit assembly plans, a new mural for the gym. When Tanya raised her hand to suggest a science showcase, the chairperson glanced past her as though she hadn't spoken. When she tried again, our students should have a space to highlight academic projects, not just athletics. The room shifted. A mother with glossy hair smiled tightly and said, that's a lovely idea, but science nights don't bring in donors like sports do. Laughter flickered across the room, low and shared. Tanya wrote it down word for word. Not donors, not value. She stayed quiet after that, but her silence was not surrender. Every slight, every dismissal, became another line in her log. She was building something invisible, a case no one else seemed to want to see. Malik noticed, of course. Why do you keep writing in that notebook? He asked one night, peering over her shoulder. Homework for moms? In a way, Tanya said, closing it gently. It's notes to help me remember. Grown-ups forget sometimes, but paper doesn't. He tilted his head. Like blueprints? Exactly like blueprints, she said, and the analogy steadied her. Malik went back to his truss bridge, laying toothpicks like beams across his small universe. Tanya wondered if one day he would see that she had been building something too. Still, doubt clawed at her. At dinner one night, Malik pushed peas around his plate and said, Mr. Ellis told me I should try out for JV basketball next year. He said engineers sit too much, but athletes move the world. His tone was neutral, but Tanya heard the weight in it. She put down her fork. And what do you think? She asked. I think I don't want to move the world with a ball, Malik said quietly. I want to move it with ideas. Tanya reached across and covered his hand. Then that's what we'll fight for. But the fight was lonely. At another PTA meeting, Tanya watched Whitman glide to the microphone. His presence polished, voice warm with practiced inclusivity. Ridgewood is proud of all our students, he declared. We build a community where every child can find their lane. The applause was automatic. Tanya sat with her arms folded. She could almost hear her father's whisper. Lanes are just walls painted with arrows. Don't let them tell you which way to walk. Her log grew fat with documentation. Test scores, policy memos, screenshots of spirit posts, featuring Malik in athletic poses, but never once in academic recognition. The poster had been joined by another, "Our future leaders, strength on the field." Malik's face appeared again, cropped mid-run. Tanya printed it and taped it in the notebook, circling the caption until the ink bled through. "Not consented." Then came the unexpected twist. One evening, as she sorted through folders, she noticed a file mislabeled in the online parent portal. Supplemental internal notes. She clicked, expecting schedules. Instead, a PDF opened with staff commentary. Her breath froze. Robinson, Malik, strong test scores, but lacks Ridgewood readiness. Parent engagement minimal. Risk of attrition high. Recommendation: place in general track to preserve cohort balance. Further down she read, potential equity optics issue. Monitor communications closely. Avoid written statements of exclusion. Encourage athletics emphasis as pathway to retention. Her stomach dropped. Equity optics. Retention. Phrases that pretended to care but really planned containment. Tanya printed the file, slipped it into her evidence folder, and sat at the table with her hands flat until her pulse slowed. They weren't just ignoring Malik's brilliance, they were strategizing how to mask it. The next day, Tanya carried the weight of the file into the PTA meeting. Though she didn't speak, she watched Whitman greet parents by name, shake hands, thank them for donations. When his eyes swept the room and landed on her, they paused only for a fraction before moving on, as if she were a shadow no one else could see. Later that evening, while organizing Malik's report card notes, Tanya found the same language repeated. Next to his math grade, excels in problem solving, but struggles with collaborative readiness. Recommend focus on group athletics for self-regulation. His science note, creative thinker, but attention better channeled through physical outlets. She stared until the words blurred, then took photos of each page. In the margin of her log, she wrote, "They are rewriting his brilliance as behavior." She wanted to scream. Instead, she folded the papers carefully, slid them into a folder marked bias, academic records, and locked it in the filing drawer she had bought secondhand for $20. Malik came into the room just then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mom, why are you always working?" "Because," she said softly, closing the drawer. "Some things are too important to let slip away." The fight was changing her. She noticed it in the way she carried herself at work, less apologetic for breaks, more precise with her words. She noticed it when she met Kiana, who whispered, "You look sharper." Tanya smiled thinly, "I'm keeping receipts." But she also noticed the isolation. Parents who once smiled at drop-off now avoided eye contact. Teachers who used to wave from classroom doors now closed them just before she passed. Ridgewood was tightening its ranks against her, but she would not yield. Then came the discovery that shifted the ground beneath her. One afternoon, while requesting Malik's attendance record, the secretary handed her a thick file folder by mistake. Tanya flipped it open and froze. Inside were pages she had never seen before. Malik's cumulative profile. It wasn't just grades and test scores. It was a running commentary, teachers' private notes, counselor observations, even lines about Tanya herself. Mother persistent, defensive, may escalate. Watch communications. Family engagement. Inconsistent, due to work constraints. Recommendation: track toward general placement to avoid overreach. Tanya's hand tightened on the folder. The words swam, each one heavier than the last. This wasn't just bias, it was a blueprint, a plan executed in whispers and paperwork. And she was holding proof. Before she could react, the secretary reappeared. "Oh, sorry, wrong file." She reached for it, but Tanya's hand hesitated. She had already seen too much. She slid the folder back slowly, her face neutral, her pulse racing. As she walked to her car, the words followed her like footsteps. Persistent, defensive, may escalate. They had written her into Malik's story, made her part of the problem they were solving. She gripped her steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. And in that moment Tanya knew, the fight wasn't just about Malik's placement anymore. The school was documenting her just as much as her son. She decided then, before the week was over, she would return to that office, and this time, she would find a way to keep those hidden notes in her hands. The folder had been taken from her hand too quickly, but its contents were burned into Tanya's mind. At night she could still see the words etched in bureaucratic ink: cultural fit, persistent parent, recommend general placement. She knew now it wasn't disorganization or oversight. Ridgewood had built a script for Malik, and every adult in the building seemed determined to read their lines. The next morning, Tanya sat at the kitchen table with her notebook open, pen poised. She wrote the words as she remembered them, exact phrasing where she could. Mother persistent, defensive, may escalate, family engagement, inconsistent, student, strong scores, lacks Ridgewood readiness, recommendation, general placement. She underlined Ridgewood readiness 3 times. That phrase was the weapon vague enough to hide behind, sharp enough to cut. Malik came into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, sketchbook still under his arm like a blanket. "Morning, Ma," he mumbled, reaching for cereal. Tanya smiled, but her chest ached at the thought of the notes in his file. He poured milk, sat, and flipped open his book. On the page was half of a bridge design, triangles incomplete, as if he hadn't had the heart to finish. "You okay, baby?" she asked. He shrugged. "I don't know." His spoon clinked against the bowl. "Yesterday in math I raised my hand and Mr. Ellis said, 'Let's let someone else answer this time.' He says that every time now." He looked at her directly. "Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought." The words landed like a blow. Tanya steadied her voice. "Don't you ever say that? You are more than smart. You see things they don't even know how to look at. But if I was really that smart, wouldn't they let me show it?" Malik said quietly. His eyes dropped to the sketchbook, pencil hovering but not moving. Tanya felt her throat tighten. She wanted to tell him the truth, that the system was weighing him down on purpose, but she couldn't put that burden fully on his 11-year-old shoulders. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "people don't know how to measure the kind of smart you are. But I do, and I'm writing it down so nobody can erase it." He nodded faintly, but the doubt had already found a foothold. Tanya recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same one she'd worn as a girl when her teacher told her to slow down so others can keep up. That look had followed her for years. Now she saw it settling in Malik. The weight of racism wasn't just in rules or files. It was in the quiet way a child began to doubt his own reflection. Later that week, Tanya requested another meeting with the counselor. When Miss Nolan handed her Malik's folder to review, watched closely of course, Tanya flipped through as though calmly checking grades. But what she found made her pulse pound. Robinson struggles with cultural fit in group settings, tends towards solitary problem solving, may not adapt to Ridgewood's style of collaboration, shows brilliance in quantitative tasks but needs redirection toward peer-appropriate goals. Peer-appropriate goals. Tanya wanted to scream. Malik's test scores were there too. Raw numbers placing him in the top percentiles statewide. But next to each score was a teacher comment diminishing it. Excels, but performance not sustainable long-term. High result may not reflect true ability. They were rewriting his brilliance as a problem. Tanya closed the file slowly, her hands trembling beneath the desk. This wasn't incompetence. This was intentional. A paper trail designed to make Malik smaller, to make Tanya seem unreasonable, to ensure no one outside Ridgewood would question why a boy like him was never pushed forward. When she got home that evening, she found Malik sitting on the floor, textbooks spread around him. He looked up, frustration in his face. "Ma, I can't get this one," he said, holding out a math problem. "I've tried, like 5 times. She sat beside him, glanced at the problem, and smiled gently. "Baby, you did it right the first time." He frowned. "Then why do I keep feeling wrong?" Her heart cracked. She touched his cheek. "Because they want you to feel that way. But we know better." He leaned into her hand for a moment, then pulled away, muttering, "Maybe I should just try basketball like they keep saying. At least then I won't disappoint anybody." Tanya's chest burned. "You don't exist to make them comfortable," she said softly. "You exist to build what only you can build." But later, when Malik was asleep, she sat in the living room with tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She could fight the school. She could gather every receipt. But how could she fight the erosion of her son's belief in himself? That was the heaviest weight of all. The next morning, she slipped into Ridgewood with a determination she hadn't felt in weeks. She walked past the receptionist without waiting for permission and knocked directly on Whitman's office door. The secretary called after her, but Tanya didn't stop. Whitman looked up from his desk as she entered, eyebrows raised. "Mrs. Robinson. No appointment?" "No," Tanya said, voice low but steady. "This can't wait." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands, amused at her audacity. "Very well. What seems so urgent?" Tanya met his gaze without blinking. I've read what your teachers have written about my son. About his so-called cultural fit. About his scores being too good to believe. About me being a problem for asking questions. Her voice sharpened. You've built a case against him, and against me. I want to know why. For the first time, Whitman's smile faltered. He adjusted his tie, then spoke with a deliberate calm. Mrs. Robinson, you must understand. Our job is to ensure students thrive here. Not every child can, regardless of scores. Sometimes it's about the family. Sometimes it's about fit. Tanya stepped closer. Fit is just another word for you don't belong. Whitman tilted his head. Belonging is not universal. Ridgewood has a culture, traditions, expectations. Forcing someone into that, when they are misaligned, well, it isn't fair to the child. Tanya's fists curled at her sides. You mean it isn't fair to the school? He said nothing, just held her stare. The silence louder than any denial. Tanya drew a sharp breath. I'm not going to let you shrink him down to what you think he should be. Whitman's expression hardened. Mrs. Robinson, you are walking a fine line. Advocacy is one thing. Escalation is another. And if you continue this way, you may find Ridgewood is not the right environment for Malik at all. Tanya froze. The words were spoken calmly, but the threat beneath them was unmistakable. Push too hard, and Malik could be removed altogether. Her heart pounded, but she held her ground. If Ridgewood can't see his worth, that says everything about Ridgewood, not about Malik. Whitman's smile returned, thin and cold. Be careful, Mrs. Robinson. Sometimes persistence creates consequences. Tanya's breath caught. For a moment she thought of her father again. Name the wall. Well, she had named it. And now the wall was speaking back. Tanya left the office with fire in her chest. But just as she reached the door, she heard Whitman mutter something under his breath that stopped her cold. She turned back, stunned by what she'd just heard. Her hand was already on the doorknob when she heard it. Whitman's voice, low and unguarded, skimming the room like a knife. They never accept their lane. The words were quiet enough to pass as air, but Tanya felt them like contact. She turned back, pulse ticking in her neck. He didn't realize she'd paused. He didn't realize she'd heard. A knock came from the hallway. Whitman's tone reset to professional. Come in. The door opened, and Ms. Alvarez stepped inside, a folder hugged tight to her chest. Up close, she looked younger than Tanya remembered from the math wing. Tired eyes, steady spine. You asked to see me, she said. Whitman gestured to the chair. Briefly, his gaze flicked to Tanya standing by the door. Mrs. Robinson, we're finished here. Miss Alvarez, have a seat. Tanya didn't move. The secretary's voice floated from outside. Ma'am? But Tanya ignored it and took one quiet step backward into the narrow slice of hallway outside the door. The hinge didn't catch. The door stayed a thumb's width open. Through the seam, the office unfolded in slivers. A profile, a hand, a page turning. She knew eavesdropping could be used against her. She also knew what it cost when you left a room without hearing everything said about your child. Whitman lowered himself into his chair with practiced calm. I'm seeing irregularities in your assessments. Miss Alvarez, your curve is generous, your notes, optimist, accurate. Alvarez corrected softly. Not optimistic. Whitman's smile was thin. Ridgewood requires alignment. We preserve cohort balance for a reason. He tapped the folder in her hands. You flagged Malik Robinson as top quintile. That doesn't square with what we're seeing in other domains. Alvarez didn't look away. Malik's raw score places him in the top 5% statewide. The inconsistency your system flagged is a timing anomaly because he checked his last two answers. It's a false positive. She slid a sheet across his desk. The page caught the light, columns, timestamps, a clean arc of numbers that told the truth. This is the data. Whitman eased the page back with a fingertip. Data doesn't run the school. Culture does. Culture doesn't solve equations, Alvarez said. Children do. The room held its breath. Outside, Tanya watched the slice of Whitman's face, the muscle in his jaw stepping in and out. We are not going to elevate a student who destabilizes the cohort, Whitman said. Our donors expect predictability. Alvarez blinked. Predictability is not the same as excellence. Be careful, Ms. Alvarez, Whitman said mildly. You're on a 1-year contract. Enthusiasm is charming. Misalignment is not. I'm aligned with math, she said. I'm aligned with children. He folded his hands. Then align with Ridgewood. I'm asking you to resubmit your notes on Malik, emphasizing areas for growth. We'll keep him where he is. I won't falsify a file, Alvarez said. You'll calibrate it, he corrected. For the good of the community. He leaned back. We've had parents like Mrs. Robinson before. They make noise. It passes. The school endures. Help us avoid another optics headache. Tanya felt the word optics lodge under her ribs. Another. How many were folded into that word? Alvarez's fingers tightened on the folder. When she spoke, her voice had dropped. With respect, if we hide Malik's ability because of optics, the headache isn't the problem. We are. Whitman's silence was surgical. Finally, he stood, signaling the end. Thank you, Miss Alvarez. Please send your revised notes by end of day. Alvarez rose. I'll send the data, she said, and my notes accurately. Whitman's smile returned. All teeth. And I will note your position accurately as well. The chair scraped. Papers shifted. Tanya slid away from the crack and put her face back into neutrality. The door opened. Alvarez stepped out, nearly colliding with Tanya. Their eyes locked for a beat. That said everything. You heard. I did. Be careful. You too. Mrs. Robinson, Alvarez said aloud, voice bright enough to pass inspection. I was just coming to find you. Do you have a minute? Tanya nodded. Of course. They walked in silence down the corridor, past the framed photographs that told one story about Ridgewood and not the others. Alvarez led her into the copy room, an in-between space with a window that didn't open, and a hum that could cover a whisper. Before anything, Alvarez said, checking the hall, I need you to know something. I sent you the text about Lab 2B. She held Tanya's gaze. I'm sorry for the way it had to happen. I couldn't put my name on it and keep my job. Tanya's breath left her in a small rush. You? Alvarez nodded. I saw the rubric change at 7:30. I've been watching. I can't say much, but I can show you this. She slipped her folder open and pulled out pages like contraband. Malik's diagnostic report with the raw figures, a printout of the timing logs, the original rubric language, and clipped to the back a memo with a header that chilled Tanya. Cohort equilibrium, spring placement. Alvarez tapped the memo. This went out from the board liaison last week. It uses phrases like balance, and readiness, and retention pathways. In practice, it's a way to avoid moving kids like Malik into advanced tracks if their parents aren't the right profile. Tanya swallowed hard. He said donors expect predictability. They do, Alvarez said. And predictability looks like last year's brochure. She laid Malik's score report flat. Here, column A is raw. Column B is scaled by state. Column C is Ridgewood's internal adjustment. You'll see a manual override. She pointed to a notation at the bottom. Override general pending community verification. The initials next to it were a neat JB. J. Barrow, Tanya murmured. The lab teacher. Alvarez nodded once. This is supposed to be invisible to parents. She slid over the timing log. And this is the inconsistency they're hiding behind. See the last two sections? He flagged them for review, and then rechecked his work. That reads like integrity, not assistance. Tanya ran her finger down the columns. Numbers steadied her. Can I keep copies? I printed 2 sets, Alvarez said. One stays here, one goes with you. She pulled a small stack from the bottom of the folder, already clipped, already ready to disappear into a bag. Do not say you got this from me. If they trace it, they will not hesitate to cut me loose. Tanya met her eyes. Why are you doing this? Alvarez exhaled. Because I was a Malik. Different school, same rules. I learned to write answers in the way the rubric liked, instead of the way the math made sense. I can't stand by and watch them dim a child, because the light doesn't flatter their brochure. A copy machine shuddered awake somewhere in the building. The hum made the room feel safer than it was. Tanya slid the papers into her tote, heart pounding with a new rhythm, fear braided with relief. 2 more things, Alvarez said, voice lower. 1, I think they're documenting you. Not just Malik. There's language in the system. Tanya nodded. She'd seen it. 2, if you go public right now, they will retaliate. It will look like a behavioral concern, or a community misalignment. They'll call it humane off-ramping. She grimaced. They'll push him out mid-year, and smile while they do it. Tanya felt the room tilt. So what do I do? Sit on proof? You build your case, Alvarez said. You request records in writing. Use the phrase you used before. You ask for the audit trail, the actual change log. They won't want to give it, but they have to. Meanwhile, you keep Malik's profile high in ways they can't recast. External competitions, third-party validations, make it harder for them to claim he's small. A silence settled between them, heavy and exact. Tanya could see the cost of this conversation in Alvarez's shoulders, the way she held herself like a person wearing a target. You said you can't say much, Tanya said. Why tell me anything at all? Because I need you to know you're not crazy. Alvarez said simply. They want you to doubt your eyes. Don't. Footsteps approached. Alvarez slid the remaining papers back into her folder in one clean motion. A teacher poked his head in, saw them, nodded, left. Alvarez waited until the hall was empty again. Then she pulled one more sheet from the back, a photo of the Diversity in Motion poster from the gym wall. Time-stamped with the day it went up. In the lower corner, a tiny sticker with a code. Scan this, she said. It's the media release list. Your signature isn't on it. They posted his image without consent. Tanya stared at the code, at the proof she'd felt in her bones. What happens if I push? She asked, voice cracked with conviction. Alvarez's answer was measured. They circle wagons. They label you difficult. They make your son into a challenge. Or they find an exit ramp that looks like a favor. She held Tanya's gaze. So if you push smart. I can do smart, Tanya said. I know, Alvarez replied. That's why I picked you. The way she said picked caught Tanya off guard. You picked me? Alvarez swallowed. When I saw the initial placements, I pushed back in the meeting. I said Malik belonged in advanced math and science. Mr. Barrows said he wasn't a Ridgewood kid. I told him that's the problem with how we talk about Ridgewood. The room went quiet. After that, my inbox changed. She gave a small, humorless smile. Probationary contracts are easy to adjust. You could lose your job, Tanya said. I could, Alvarez agreed. Then, softer, and Malik could lose himself. She straightened. I won't let that be the outcome. Tanya felt something shift, a loneliness she hadn't dared to name, loosening its grip. Thank you, she said, and the words were too small for what she meant. Alvarez checked the hall again. I have to go. One last thing. There's a board subcommittee on equity. It's real, but it's toothless, unless someone puts teeth in its mouth. If you file a complaint there, it triggers a review they can't bury easily. But make sure your timing protects Malik. How? Tanya asked. After you anchor him elsewhere, Alvarez said. Get him recognized outside Ridgewood. Science fair, math league, anything with judges who don't belong to this ecosystem. Then when you present the data, it looks less like a mother's outrage, and more like a system error against a proven talent. The plan clicked into place inside Tanya's head, with the crispness of a well-drawn line. She thought of Malik's bridges, the way triangles hold. She could build this one support at a time. A voice floated down the hall. Whitman, closer. Alvarez's posture tightened. Go, she whispered. And Tanya, use a scanner app, not photos. PDFs look harder to argue with. Tanya slipped out first, turned left, disappeared into the stream of parents and students. Her bag felt heavier, in a good way. Proof, not just her word against a gleaming wall. Paper that spoke. She found herself outside, breathing air that didn't belong to Ridgewood, and allowed her hands to shake for exactly 5 seconds before she stilled them again. Kiana texted, You okay? Tanya typed back, I'm not alone, then deleted it, replaced it with, call you later. She would not write anything she wasn't ready to defend out loud. On the drive home, the papers at her side seemed to hum with potential and danger. Malik's voice from that morning, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought, played back cruelly. She pictured showing him the numbers, the raw scores, the truth that would put his reflection back on its feet. She pictured Whitman's face when confronted with a stack of receipts that didn't fit in his lane. She pictured the board email subject line, the equity committee forced to read what they'd prefer to call regrettable misunderstandings. The phone buzzed as she waited at a red light. A new email from the school. Notice of community check-in. Her stomach dropped. The body preview read, We'd like to discuss Malik's adjustment to Ridgewood and the importance of collaborative norms. She opened it when she parked. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 8 a.m., with Whitman, Miss Nolan, and Coach Fairfax. No academic lead, no Ms. Alvarez. She forwarded the email to her private account, then to the folder. She printed it to PDF, named it with the date and time, Every action was a beam placed where it could bear weight. At home, she spread the pages across the table. She ran a scanner app, watched the blue lines frame the margins, tapped Save as PDF. She labeled each file, raw scores Malik.tpip, timing log.tip, equilibrium memo dpip, media consent breach dpip. Evidence lives in names. Her phone lit up again with a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail, then pressed play. Whitman's voice filled the room, smooth as varnish. Mrs. Robinson, we look forward to partnering with you at Friday's check-in. Please remember Ridgewood's policy on recording conversations without consent. We trust your cooperation for the good of the community. Tanya stood in the quiet, the warning tucked inside the courtesy like a blade in cloth. She set the phone down, steady. If she couldn't record, she would bring a witness. If they wouldn't let her bring a witness, she would take stenographer's notes and email them back to the room before noon. The apartment door opened. Malik stepped in, cheeks pink from the walk. Hey ma. He dropped his backpack and looked at the table. What's all this? Blueprints, Tanya said, because it was true. He hovered, reading her face. Am I in trouble? She reached for him, pulled him into a hug that couldn't fix everything but could mark the ground. You are in a fight, she said into his hair. And I am in it with you. He pulled back, searching her eyes. What kind of fight? The kind you win with proof, she said. He nodded slowly, as if letting the words settle in his mouth. Her phone vibrated with another message. This one from an unlisted address. We see what you're doing. Be advised. Families who escalate often reconsider enrollment. No signature. No courage. Tanya looked at the stack of documents. Proof could say at this time. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, the papers lay in neat stacks, heavy with both promise and risk. For the first time since Whitman's office, Tanya understood the shape of the choice before her. Expose the system now, and risk it swallowing Malik whole, or keep gathering until the truth was too big to bury, and hope he didn't crumble under the weight of waiting. She slid the proofs into the sleeve, sealed it, and tucked it deep in her bag. The zipper's rasp sounded like a line being drawn. Tanya now had what she needed to blow the story open. But as her phone chimed with the official invite to Friday's community check-in, a second notification appeared beneath it. Enrollment status. Under review. The notification on Tanya's phone, enrollment status, under review, sat on the screen like a flashing red light. She stared at it long after Malik had gone to bed, the glow of the phone reflecting in her tired eyes. Proof was supposed to be her shield, but now it felt like a target. If she moved too fast, Ridgewood could use Malik's status to eject him. If she moved too slow, the school could grind him down until he doubted himself beyond repair. She felt trapped in a narrowing corridor with doors on either side, all of them dangerous. She opened her laptop and searched late into the night. School discrimination case law, educational bias lawsuits, student records rights. The words blurred with legal jargon, but patterns emerged. Parents had sued schools before. Some had won, some had lost everything. In bold print, she read, schools may recommend withdrawal at their discretion to preserve community harmony. She imagined Whitman wielding those words like a scalpel, smiling as he called it humane. At 2 a.m, Tanya closed the laptop and whispered into the quiet, if I take them to court, they'll take him out of here before he even gets a chance to prove himself. She pressed her palms into her eyes, trying to block the image of Malik walking home with a withdrawal slip in his backpack. Legal action could come later. Right now, Malik's spirit was the battlefield. The next day, Malik came home quieter than usual. His sneakers scuffed against the floor as he dropped his bag. How was school? Tanya asked, searching his face. He shrugged. Fine. His voice was thin, a boy's attempt at invisibility. She waited. He sank into the couch, fiddling with the zipper of his backpack. Finally, he muttered, some kids were calling me the token. The word dropped like lead in the room. Tanya's chest tightened. Who? Doesn't matter. His jaw set in a way she recognized from her own mirror. They said I only got into Ridgewood because they needed numbers. Said I should be grateful for what I get. Said if I was really smart I wouldn't be in general track. His voice cracked on the last words. Tanya sat beside him, gripping her knees to keep steady. Baby, you earned every inch you stand on. Don't let them sell you a lie. He looked at her, eyes glistening but defiant. Then why do I feel like I don't belong here? Tanya had no answer that didn't sound like a wound. Instead, she pulled him close, holding his small frame against her chest. He was still a child, but Ridgewood had already started chiseling him into a shape that wasn't his. She pressed her lips to his hair and whispered, "They don't get to decide who you are." But deep down, she felt time slipping. Self-doubt grows quietly, until it becomes a truth children live by. If Malik's confidence broke now, no amount of evidence later would glue it back together. That week, Tanya began arriving at Ridgewood early, sitting in her car outside the gates, watching parents drop off children with easy laughter. She wondered if any of them carried the same fear, if any of them documented every phrase, every glance, every word the way she did. Tiana texted her encouragements. "Keep building. Don't let them corner you." But it was Malik's weary eyes she couldn't stop replaying. At Thursday's PTA gathering, Tanya raised her voice again. "Why don't we host an academic showcase alongside the athletics assembly?" The chairperson smiled, then pivoted to a new agenda item. Minutes later, the group cheered a $5,000 fundraiser for new uniforms. Tanya sat back, invisible, until a father muttered just loud enough, "Some people never understand tradition." She recorded it in her notebook. Tradition you. Silence. At work, exhaustion showed. A colleague, Miss Green, pulled her aside. "You look worn thin, Tanya. Everything all right?" Tanya hesitated. "My boy's fighting battles at school he shouldn't have to fight." Miss Green nodded knowingly. "The system tries to break them young. Don't let them win." Her words stayed with Tanya that night, as she sat at her desk scanning Alvarez's documents. Again, the proof was undeniable. Malik's numbers were brilliant. The downgrades were deliberate. She traced the initials JB on the override note with her finger, until the paper felt thin. The urge to walk into Whitman's office, slam the pages on his desk, and demand justice swelled in her chest. But Alvarez's warning echoed, "If you go public now, they'll off-ramp him and smile while they do it." She couldn't gamble Malik's place. Not yet. Friday morning came, gray and heavy with rain. Tanya walked Malik to the gates, kissed his forehead, and watched him disappear into the building that felt more like a fortress each day. As she turned to leave, the secretary hurried toward her. "Mrs. Robinson," she said too formally, "Principal Whitman would like to see you in his office." Immediately, the summons coiled in Tanya's stomach. She followed the secretary down the familiar hall, past the walls lined with Ridgewood's history. Rows of white faces framed in gold, smiling from decades of photographs. She straightened her shoulders and pushed through the oak door into Whitman's office. He was waiting behind his desk, hands folded neatly, expression unreadable. "Mrs. Robinson," he said with the smoothness of a man who had already rehearsed his lines. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Tanya stayed standing. "What is this about?" Whitman gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit. I have an announcement regarding Malik's future here at Ridgewood." The words chilled her blood. An announcement. Not a discussion. She sat slowly, every nerve braced. Whitman leaned forward, his eyes cool, steady, and merciless. He cleared his throat and said, "After careful review, the administration has decided Malik's enrollment status must be reconsidered." Whitman's words carried the weight of finality. Malik's enrollment status must be reconsidered. Tanya's pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. She had trained herself to listen without breaking, to absorb sharp edges without bleeding in front of men like him. She folded her hands in her lap, waiting for the rest. Whitman smoothed a paper in front of him, the motion slow and deliberate. After a comprehensive review, he said, "The faculty team has determined that Malik will be reassigned to a program better suited to his strengths, the General Cohort Plus. It emphasizes collaboration, physical wellness, and social growth." Her stomach tightened. "General Cohort Plus," she repeated, tasting the euphemism. "That isn't advanced placement. That isn't even middle tier." "It's not about tiers," Whitman said smoothly. "It's about environments. We've observed that Malik thrives when he's engaged physically. He demonstrates resilience, energy, unnatural athleticism. The General Plus track will allow him to develop those qualities without the unnecessary stress of advanced academics." The words slithered across the desk like a velvet rope. Tanya felt the heat rising in her chest, but she forced her breathing to slow. "Unnecessary stress?" she asked. "Yes," Whitman replied, leaning back. "Pushing him into accelerated academics when he is clearly struggling socially would be inhumane. We have to think about the whole child. His well-being must come before raw scores." Tanya's hands pressed into her knees, under the desk. Raw scores, she thought. The ones you erased. She kept her tone quiet. And you believe erasing his achievements is humane? Whitman's smile flickered. We're not erasing anything. We're redirecting. You should think of this as a gift. An opportunity to protect Malik from pressures he isn't ready for. A gift. Tanya nearly laughed, but her throat held it in. She pictured Malik's bridge sketches, his notebook filled with circuitry diagrams, his voice whispering, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. This wasn't protection, it was a calculated silencing, a way to make sure he never climbed high enough to be seen. Tell me, Tanya said softly, how many of your donor family's children are in this General Plus program? Whitman's eyes flickered just for a second. This isn't about donors. Of course it isn't, Tanya murmured, her lips curving without humor. She leaned forward, her voice steady. You want him invisible, not a liability in your statistics. Not a name that makes someone ask questions about why the system doesn't look like its brochures. Whitman's tone hardened, though he still smiled. Mrs. Robinson, you are misinterpreting the situation. We're trying to give Malik a fair chance. No, Tanya said, her voice steel under velvet. You're trying to give Ridgewood cover. The silence stretched. Whitman clasped his hands, as though he were praying. Finally, he said, you need to understand something. Pushing too hard can backfire. Parents who insist on forcing placements often create an environment that makes their child miserable. If you truly want Malik to stay at Ridgewood, it would be wise to accept this adjustment gracefully. The threat was wrapped in civility, but Tanya heard it clearly. Comply or lose him altogether. She inhaled slowly, gathering every ounce of restraint. I appreciate your concern for my son, she said. But Malik's well-being is not served by lowering expectations. He belongs in advanced academics, and you know it. Whitman leaned back, studying her with cold amusement. Belonging, Mrs. Robinson, is not about numbers, it's about culture, and culture cannot be forced. Her fingers twitched against her lap, wanting to clench, wanting to throw the documents from Alvarez in his face. But Alvarez's warning echoed in her mind. If you go public now, they'll off-ramp him and smile while they do it. She couldn't give Whitman that satisfaction. Not yet. So she smiled instead, the kind of smile that hid fire. And thank you for your perspective, Principal Whitman. We'll give it thought. Whitman's brows lifted, surprised at her composure. He expected anger, protest, begging. He expected her to reveal her cards. Instead, she gave him nothing but politeness. Very good, he said. I'll note your cooperation. She rose from her chair, smoothing her skirt. And I'll note yours, she said quietly. For a moment. Their eyes locked. His glimmered with the confidence of a man who thought he'd won, hers burned with a different fire. One he did not yet recognize. Tanya walked out of the office, her heels striking the floor with deliberate rhythm. She passed the photographs of Ridgewood's legacy, smiling faces of alumni, year after year, rows of children who had been told they belonged. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the glass frames, a reminder that she was an intruder in the story the school wanted to tell. But she also knew something Whitman didn't. She had the proof, she had the truth, and she had patience. When she reached her car, she sat in the silence, gripping the steering wheel. Her anger boiled, hot and righteous, but it did not spill over. Instead, it hardened into resolve. She could not outshout Whitman, not yet, but she could outlast him. She pulled out her notebook and wrote, Whitman's move, reassignment, erasure, masked as humane, threat implied, resist removal. Then beneath it, in larger letters, don't fight his game, redefine it. The rain began to fall again, tapping the windshield in uneven rhythms. Tanya watched the drops slide down the glass, thinking of Malik inside the building, sitting in a classroom where his brilliance was being painted over in dull colors. If she stormed the walls now, he could be cast out. But if she played their game long enough to build a case too heavy to ignore, she could not only save Malik, she could expose Ridgewood. Her father's voice returned in memory. Steady and firm, name the wall, then build the bridge across it. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Yes, she would build. Quietly, carefully, strategically. When she drove away from Ridgewood that afternoon, she carried no visible victory. But inside she carried something stronger than rage. A plan. Whitman thought he had cornered her. He didn't realize she had stepped onto a different board entirely. Tanya decided she would play Whitman's game. but on her own terms, and as she pulled onto her street, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He's not the only one. Check the placement logs for other names. Tanya sat at the kitchen table late into the night. Documents spread around her like the pieces of a puzzle, only she could see. The words Whitman had left her with, reassigned for his own good, still rang in her ears. She knew it wasn't about Malik's well-being. It was about containment, control, the slow erasure of his potential. If Ridgewood had already decided Malik's future, then she needed to find a way to prove him undeniable outside their walls. That was when she found the link. An email buried in the district's announcements mentioned the statewide Youth Engineering Expo, open to all students. The guidelines required a teacher recommendation, or a parent's signature if the school refused. Tanya's pulse quickened. Here was a stage Ridgewood couldn't control. A panel of judges who didn't care about community fit. She printed the form, signed her name, and slid it into a folder. Malik wouldn't need to know yet what it meant to her. For him it would be a project. For her it was lifeline, and proof. The next afternoon she found Malik at the dining table, bent over a half-built model bridge, his pencils rolled against the surface, his notebook thick with sketches and numbers. She laid the form in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, eyes flicking across the page. "A competition," Tanya said casually, though her heart raced. "Engineering projects. Kids your age, you build something, you explain it, and real engineers judge it." Malik's eyes lit instantly. "I could enter?" "You could," Tanya said. "If you want to." He didn't hesitate. "I want to." He grinned for the first time in weeks, the kind of grin that made him look like himself again. From that moment, Malik threw himself into the project with single-minded focus. He sketched designs on the bus, tested structures with toothpicks, scavenged materials from the recycling bin. His room transformed into a lab. Rubber bands, glue, cardboard beams, balanced across books. Tanya watched from the doorway, holding back tears. For the first time since Ridgewood had called him average, she saw the spark return. Still, doubt lingered at school. One afternoon, Malik carried his sketches into science class. When Mr. Barrow passed by his desk, he frowned at the intricate lines. "What's this?" "My design for the state expo," Malik said proudly. Barrow's lips thinned. "Science fairs are fine, but you need to be realistic, Malik. Focus on the basics. Don't waste time chasing things beyond your level." Malik's shoulders stiffened. He looked down at the paper, suddenly unsure. Tanya heard about it that evening when he came home. His voice flat. "Mr. Barrow said it's too much for me. Maybe he's right." Tanya knelt beside him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Baby, listen to me. You don't have to argue with him. You don't have to prove anything with words. Just build it. Show them who you are without saying a word." Malik stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay." The weeks leading up to the expo were a blur of work. Malik tested bridge after bridge, each one stronger than the last. Tanya helped where she could, buying supplies, timing his stress tests, listening as he explained weight distribution, like a professor. At night she scanned Ridgewood documents into her growing archive. The quiet war waged in two arenas, one for Malik's spirit, one for the truth. Every so often, Malik would falter. "What if I don't win?" he whispered once, staring at a collapsed model. Tanya cupped his chin. "Winning isn't the point. Showing up is. Building is. You are already proving them wrong." But in her heart she knew the stakes were higher. Malik didn't realize that his success at the expo could be the lever she needed, the outside validation Ridgewood couldn't discredit. If he impressed judges there, his brilliance would be undeniable. Word of Malik's project spread quietly at Ridgewood. Some classmates mocked him. "The token kid thinks he's an engineer now," one sneered in the hallway. Another said that he'll make a basketball hoop instead of a bridge. Malik kept his head down, but Tanya could see the words cutting him. One evening, she found him staring at his model, with his hands limp at his sides. "What if they're right?" he murmured. "What if I don't belong in engineering?" She crouched beside him. "Malik, belonging isn't something they hand you. It's something you build. And every beam, every design, is you building it for yourself." His eyes watered, but he nodded, wiping his face quickly. Then he bent over the bridge again, pencil moving with fresh determination. The night before the competition, Tanya packed his project carefully into the car, wrapping it with towels so no part would bend. Malik paced the living room, reciting his explanation under his breath. The load-bearing points, the triangular distribution, stress reduction. Tanya stopped him, putting her hands on his shoulders. Breathe, she said softly. You already know it. Tomorrow you just let them see it. He looked at her, nervous and hopeful all at once.
You'll be there.
Every second, she promised. The morning of the expo arrived with bright skies, the kind that made the world feel wide. Tanya dressed carefully, Malik wore his best button down, and together they drove to the downtown convention center. The parking lot was filled with cars, parents unloading elaborate projects, solar panels, robotic arms, models taller than the kids who made them. Malik carried his bridge with both hands, eyes wide but steady. There's so many, he whispered. Doesn't matter how many, Tanya said, squeezing his shoulder. There's only one you. They entered the main hall, where rows of tables stretched under banners. Judges walked with clipboards, parents hovered, cameras flashed. Malik found his station, placed his bridge carefully, and began arranging his notes. Tanya stood back, watching him straighten his shoulders. For the first time in months, he looked like he belonged exactly where he was. But as Tanya scanned the crowd, her stomach clenched. Across the room, near the stage, stood a figure she knew too well. Silver hair, sharp suit, hands folded behind his back like a general surveying troops. Principal Edward Whitman. Her breath caught. He hadn't come to support Malik. She knew that instinctively. He was here to watch, to measure, maybe even to undermine. The sight of him in this place, outside Ridgewood's walls, made the stakes sharper than ever. Tanya's heart pounded as she realized, on the day of Malik's biggest test, Whitman was here too, and he was watching. The convention hall buzzed with voices, and the low hum of machinery, as projects whirred, clicked, and blinked across the floor. Kids in pressed shirts and nervous smiles stood beside their displays, while parents hovered at the edges, their pride disguised as casual attention. Tanya stayed a step behind Malik, her eyes scanning the rows of tables, until they stopped again on the man who made her blood tighten. Principal Whitman. He wasn't here as a mentor. He wasn't here for encouragement. Tanya could see it in his stance, the way he lingered in the corner of the room, his expression carefully neutral, like a man bracing for an outcome he couldn't control. He had no clipboard, no child by his side, only a calculating gaze fixed in Malik's direction. Tanya forced her shoulders straight. This was Malik's moment, not Whitman's stage. She slipped to the side of the table and whispered, "Breathe, baby. They came to see ideas. Just show them yours." Malik nodded, clutching his notes for a second, before laying them down. He adjusted his bridge model, now enhanced with tiny solar panels he had wired to light up a series of bulbs, and stood taller as the judges approached. 3 of them, all adults with engineering backgrounds, leaned forward with polite interest. One raised an eyebrow as soon as Malik began. "My project," Malik said clearly, though his voice trembled at the start, "is a bridge designed to support maximum weight using minimal material. But it's more than just structure. The panels collect renewable energy from the sun. While the bridge carries people, it also produces power for the community below it." The judges leaned closer. One asked, "How do you balance load-bearing with energy efficiency?" Malik's hands came alive, moving across the model. "The weight is distributed through triangular supports here. That means less material is needed, while keeping strength. The panels don't interfere with the design. They sit at angles that match the sun's movement, so energy capture is consistent. The more people cross, the more exposure to light, the more power generated. It's about community creating power by just existing." The woman judge tilted her head, impressed. "And the wiring? Did you do this yourself?" "Yes," Malik said proudly. "I researched voltage converters. It's small scale here, but in real size the energy could supply nearby buildings. Imagine every bridge as part of a power grid." The judges exchanged looks. Tanya caught the flicker of admiration in their eyes, and her chest swelled. Malik wasn't just holding his ground. He was captivating them. One of the male judges asked a final question. "Malik, what inspired you?" He hesitated for a second, then answered softly, "I just wanted to build something that carried people and made them stronger at the same time." The woman judge's pen paused midair. Tanya felt her throat tighten. That wasn't just engineering. That was Malik's heart on display. As the judges moved on, Malik exhaled hard, like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. Tanya squeezed his shoulder. "You didn't just show them, baby. You lit the room." He grinned shyly, relief flooding his face. But across the hall, Whitman's expression darkened. His jaw was tight, his arms folded, his eyes never leaving Malik. Tanya recognized the look, not surprise at Malik's brilliance, but frustration that others were seeing it too. The hours that followed stretched like years. Presentations ended. Projects were dismantled. Whispers filled the air, as families speculated about winners. Tanya kept close to Malik, her heart pounding with each passing minute. She thought of every humiliation, the 2-hour wait in the sun, the average label, the whispered dismissal of fit, and felt them all collapsing into this single moment. The announcer stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Thank you to all the incredible young scientists who shared their work today. The judges were astounded by the creativity, innovation, and dedication in this room. Now, we present the awards. Tanya's fingers dug into her palms. Malik stood straighter, but his eyes darted nervously to hers. She gave him a nod. Steady, grounding, unshakable. Third place, the announcer said, goes to Julia Chen for her robotics navigation system. Applause filled the hall. A girl stepped forward, beaming. Second place, the announcer continued, goes to Daniel Brooks for his water purification design. More applause, louder this time. Tanya's chest tightened. Malik's name hadn't been called yet. The announcer paused, smiling at the crowd. And finally, first place. This student's project combined structural engineering, renewable energy, and community impact in a way that impressed every judge. Please congratulate. The hall seemed to freeze, breath suspended, hearts waiting. Tanya gripped Malik's hand tightly.
Malik Robinson!
The room erupted. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. Not just applause. Gasps. Some were shock. Some were admiration. Some disbelief that a boy Ridgewood had painted as average stood at the very top. Malik's eyes went wide, his mouth parting in stunned silence. Tanya felt tears burn her eyes as she pushed him forward. Go, baby. Take what's yours. He walked to the stage, clutching his bridge model, as the judges shook his hand and handed him the trophy. The applause swelled. Parents turned, whispering, pointing. Tanya caught sight of Whitman in the back of the hall, his face pale and rigid, his jaw locked. For the first time, he looked small, cornered by truth he couldn't edit. Tanya felt years of humiliation boiling into one moment of justice. Every second in the sun outside his office, every cutting remark, every not a fit, all of it collapsed under the weight of Malik, standing center stage, holding proof in his hands. She thought of her father's words, name the wall, build the bridge. Malik had built it, and now he was standing on it. But just as Tanya let herself breathe, the announcer's voice continued. And now, before we close, we have a special announcement regarding Ridgewood Academy's participants. Tanya's heart jolted. She turned sharply toward Whitman, who had stepped forward at last, his lips pressed into the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. As Malik clutched his trophy, Whitman took the microphone, and the auditorium fell silent, waiting for words that would shift everything once again. The applause still echoed when Malik stepped down from the stage, trophy in one hand, his bridge model balanced carefully in the other. Flashbulbs flared. Parents leaned toward one another, whispering as if they had just witnessed something too improbable to accept. Reporters jostled to the front, calling Malik's name, holding microphones toward a boy who only weeks ago was being told he belonged in a General Plus program.
Malik Robinson, one journalist called.
Can you tell us how you came up with the idea? Malik blinked, startled by the sudden attention. Tanya stepped close, her hand brushing his shoulder, grounding him. He cleared his throat. I just wanted to build something that carries people and helps them while they cross. His words were simple, but the sincerity made the crowd lean in. Another reporter asked, do you want to be an engineer one day? Malik nodded quickly, his voice firmer now. Yes. I want to design things that help communities, things that last. The judges exchanged glances, impressed not just by his work, but by the clarity of his vision. Parents who had earlier walked past him without a second glance, now whispered his name with a mix of awe and envy. Tanya caught the fragments. Did you see that design? He's only in middle school. Where did he say he's from? For Tanya, every murmur was vindication. She had known Malik's brilliance long before this stage, long before the trophy, long before Whitman's dismissals. But seeing others finally acknowledge it filled her with a vindication so sharp, it almost hurt. It was justice, yes, but also proof that her child was more than Ridgewood's labels. Yet in the back of the room, Whitman stood motionless, his expression carved from stone. He couldn't stop the cheers. He couldn't stop the cameras, but Tanya knew him well enough to recognize what brewed beneath that polished calm. He was calculating his next move. As the crowd began to disperse, Malik was swept into photographs. Tanya stood proudly beside him, answering small questions from parents who approached with forced smiles. One mother said, "You must be so proud." Tanya smiled, biting back the words she wanted to say. "I always was. You just couldn't see him until now." When the lights dimmed and the tables cleared, Tanya felt the air shift. Whitman was no longer standing at the back. He was moving through the thinning crowd, his polished shoes clicking against the floor with slow precision. He stopped directly in front of Tanya and Malik. "Well," Whitman said smoothly, his voice honeyed but brittle. "Congratulations, Malik. Quite a performance." Malik clutched his trophy tighter, glancing at his mother before murmuring, "Thank you, sir." Whitman's smile widened, but it didn't touch his eyes. "I must admit, I didn't expect to see Ridgewood represented this way." His gaze flicked briefly to Tanya, sharp and pointed. "But surprises can be instructive." Tanya's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression calm. Malik earned every bit of this. Nothing surprising about hard work showing results. "Of course," Whitman said, his tone laced with condescension. "Hard work is admirable, but it's also important to remember that one moment of success doesn't guarantee consistency. Expectations can be dangerous if they're set too high." Malik frowned slightly, but Tanya placed a hand on his shoulder. She understood the message beneath the words. It wasn't encouragement, it was a warning. Whitman leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Tanya could hear. "Enjoy the spotlight, Mrs. Robinson. But do understand, Ridgewood has its own way of measuring value. And not every audience is as forgiving as this one." The backhanded congratulations carried the chill of a threat. Tanya's pulse hammered, but she refused to let him see her flinch. She looked him in the eye, her voice steady. "We don't need forgiveness. We have proof." Whitman's smile never broke, but his eyes hardened like glass. "We'll see," he said softly. He straightened, gave Malik one last thin smile, and walked away, his suit cutting a clean line through the crowd. Tanya watched him go, her stomach tightening with the knowledge that this victory, as sweet as it was, would not be the end. Whitman wasn't retreating, he was regrouping. As Malik chattered excitedly about the trophy on the way to the car, Tanya forced herself to smile and nod, hiding the storm that Whitman's words had stirred. She should have felt only triumph, only joy. But in her gut, she knew Whitman too well. He would not let this humiliation stand without striking back. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The fight was far from over. Malik had just proven himself undeniable, but Ridgewood's gatekeeper had already drawn his next line in the sand. As Tanya drove away, her phone buzzed with an email notification. "Mandatory Parent Conference. Malik Robinson. Immediate attention required." The email subject line glowed on Tanya's phone as she pulled out of the convention center parking lot. "Mandatory Parent Conference. Malik Robinson. Immediate attention required." She didn't open it. Not yet. In the passenger seat, Malik held his trophy like it might evaporate if he loosened his grip. The afternoon light washed over his face, softening the lines that had hardened these past weeks. He kept turning the base to read the engraving, as if confirming that the words stayed put. "First place statewide youth engineering expo." "Mom?" he asked, voice small with awe. "They said I built something that helps people." "You did," she said, keeping her eyes on the road. "You always were." At a red light, her phone vibrated again. "Kiana. Girl, Channel 7 just tweeted the winners. They want to talk to Malik. Call me." Tanya felt the current shift. The room of whispers at Ridgewood was about to become a room with microphone. By the time they reached home, the story was moving. A local paper pushed a brief, "Local kid tops state expo," with renewable energy bridge. Comments stacked fast. A freelance education reporter messaged Tanya through Facebook. "Heard your son was labeled average at his school. Would you speak on background?" She stared at the message, feeling the line between private and public thin to a thread. She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she took a picture of Malik holding the trophy beside his model and texted it to her father's old number. Still active, still hers to keep for messages no one would read. "We built the bridge, Daddy." That night, Malik fell asleep with the trophy on the nightstand. Tanya went to the kitchen table and opened the mandatory email. Language dressed in formality stared back. "We appreciate Malik's extracurricular participation. Due to recent events and attention, We believe a check-in regarding expectations and community norms is prudent. Please attend a conference Monday, 8 a.m. with Principal Whitman, guidance, and student life. Prudent. Expectations. Community norms. Words meant to shrink joy to fit their hallways. Sunday morning, the first TV segment aired. Tanya and Malik watched from their couch, legs touching. The piece was straightforward, Malik speaking in that careful, earnest way, judges praising the design's elegance, a shot of the bridge lighting small bulbs like a row of tiny suns. Then the reporter's voice lowered. Sources tell us Malik's school recently placed him in a lower track, calling his performance inconsistent. His mother declined to comment. The camera cut to Ridgewood's exterior, ivy, banners, legacy. The school had provided a statement. Ridgewood Academy supports all students in finding their appropriate lane for success. Tanya muted the ending. Malik looked at her, brows drawn. Appropriate lane? Noise, she said gently. You built something real. That's the only lane I see. Monday came gray and tight. Tanya walked Malik to the gates, handed him a lunch he'd forget to eat, kissed his forehead longer than usual. Then she went to Whitman's office. He had assembled a panel, Miss Nolan with a file, Coach Fairfax with a performance chart, and a woman from communications named Elise, whose smile was engineered to neutralize bad news. Whitman stood when Tanya entered. Practice, not respect. Mrs. Robinson, he said smoothly. Congratulations again to Malik. Truly remarkable work. Our goal today is to ensure his transition back into school is balanced. Balanced, Tanya repeated, sitting. He built a bridge powered by light. Balance is his specialty. Elise folded her hands. With media attention, we must manage expectations. Unchecked visibility can harm a child. Ms. Nolan slid a sheet across the table. We recommend continuing Malik, in general plus this term. Elevated academics might create a climate of unhealthy competition among peers. And frankly, he'll benefit from the leadership opportunities in athletics. Coach Fairfax nodded, pointing at a chart. He's got explosiveness. If he leans in, scholarships down the line are very realistic. Tanya kept her voice even. He already has evidence of where he belongs. Advanced math, advanced science, you have his numbers, you chose a different story. Whitman's smile thinned. Numbers aren't the whole child. Nor is your brochure, Tanya said. A pause. The clock ticked. Elise's pen scratched a neutral note. Whitman steepled his fingers. We're trying to shelter Malik from pressure. Public attention fades. The routines of Ridgewood endure. Let's secure his sense of belonging now. He belongs where he can think, Tanya said. Where his thinking is not renamed as trouble. The meeting ended with nothing resolved, and everything decided in the way these rooms decide things, with a promise to revisit, with a note in a file under parent, insists, with a tone that signaled consequences would arrive via policy, not posture. As Tanya stepped into the hallway, her phone buzzed. An email from the Expo Committee. Notice of review Project E147, Robinson. Her stomach tightened before she read the first line. An anonymous complaint has been filed regarding adult assistance in the construction of Project E147. While we have no evidence at this time, we are obligated to review. Please provide a log of materials, process notes, and attestations within 72 hours. Anonymous. Obligated to review. The words bruised on contact. She pressed her palm to her sternum and breathed until oxygen returned. You okay? A voice asked softly. Tanya turned. Miss Alvarez stood at the end of the hall, eyes flicking toward the office door. 5 minutes? She whispered. They stepped into the copy room, their temporary confessional. Alvarez pulled a thin envelope from a manila folder and slid it to Tanya. Inside were 3 printed pages, the audit trail. Alvarez said quietly. Change logs on Malik's placement. They show manual overrides with initials and timestamps. And she swallowed, choosing courage over caution. The training slides from the cohort equilibrium session. You need to see the language they use when they think no one is listening. Tanya scanned the slides. Maintain culture cohesion. Avoid destabilizing outliers. Preserve donor confidence. It was all there, coded phrases that meant what they didn't dare say aloud. She flipped to the changelog. The override sat like a confession. Override to General JB pending community verification. Barrow, Tanya said. Of course. One more, Alvarez said, passing a final printout. A forwarded email, from Whitman to a board member. Subject line Compliance Concern Expo. He CC'd the Expo general address. He framed it as due diligence, unusual sophistication for age, ensure adult assistance rules enforced. The air in the copy room thinned. He's trying to undo the win, Tanya said. Alvarez's jaw worked. He'll try. But listen to me, truth is starting to travel faster than his emails. Are you safe? Tanya asked. Alvarez's eyes flicked. I was asked to take a few days while they review my grading. I'm fine, she breathed out softly. Do what you're already doing. But protect Malik from the blast radius. Tanya folded the papers into a folder she could hide under 1,000 grocery lists. Thank you. Alvarez squeezed her arm, a quick human thing, and was gone. By noon, the local story had grown teeth. Channel 7 aired a follow-up. Malik's win, the placement letter that predated Whitman's meeting, the appropriate lane statement. A black anchor looked into the camera and asked, who decides a child's future, and who gets to call that decision humane? Parents texted Tanya, some to congratulate, some to tell her to stop stirring trouble. An anonymous number texted a single sentence, you're making enemies you can't see. Kiana stormed into their apartment that evening with her laptop and a bag of takeout. We're making a website, she said. A receipts page. No names, just documents. They can't tell us we imagined it if the files have their fonts. Alvarez is being targeted, Tanya said, handing her the new papers. And Whitman filed a compliance concern with the Expo. Kiana's eyes widened. He wants the trophy back. He wants the narrative back, Tanya said. He doesn't care about a trophy. They scanned the documents, converting images to searchable PDFs, naming files like promises, changelog Malik.tebik, cohort equilibrium training.tebik, Whitman compliance email.tebik. Kiana set up a simple page, black text on white. Let Malik build. They posted screenshots with dates redacted, initials visible. They wrote a single line at the top. When a system calls brilliance a threat, that system is broken. Within an hour, the page had 100 views, then 500, then 3,000. Comments poured in. Parents from other schools, teachers from other districts, former Ridgewood students who remembered their own fitting. Some messages made Tanya shake. My son was moved to general the week we stopped donating. My daughter was told she was too intense for AP. They said I was not aligned. A reporter called from the city paper.
We're doing a larger piece, she said.
On placement bias in elite schools, coded language, athletic tracks. Off the record, do you have internal training materials? Tanya stared at the folder in her lap. She was passed off the record now. On the record, she said. Steady.
Yes.
The article dropped the next morning. When fit means no, inside Ridgewood Academy's quiet gatekeeping. It quoted Tanya. Anonymized other parents. Referenced the leaked slides. It named cohort equilibrium for what it was. A net that caught the same kids over and over. The piece noted an email from a principal to the Expo, questioning the legitimacy of a black child's win. It didn't need Whitman's name for readers to know. Whitman issued a statement by afternoon. Ridgewood stands for equity. Any suggestion otherwise is a misinterpretation by individuals, unfamiliar with our context. It was the kind of denial that pretended to be clarity. But comments under the school's post weren't buying it. Alumni weighed in. Some defensive, some apologetic, some stunned. A few donors announced pausing contributions pending clarity. A teacher from 10 years ago posted, "We were told to protect the cohort. Some students were too much for advanced." That's how it was said. At pickup, Tanya felt eyes following her like cameras. A mother she barely knew stepped close and whispered, "For what it's worth. Thank you." Another said, "You're going to ruin this place for everyone," and walked away before Tanya could respond. Malik climbed into the car quietly. "They took my picture down from the gym," he said, staring at his hands. "The one from the Diversity in Motion poster. It's just not there anymore." "It was never consented," Tanya said. "They don't get to tell that story with your face."
It feels like I did something wrong, he murmured.
"You did something right," she said, meeting his eyes, "and some people don't know what to do with right." That night, the Expo committee emailed back. Review complete. Allegation unsubstantiated. Project E4T7 stands. Congratulations again. Tanya exhaled for the first time in days. She printed the email and slid it into the wind sleeve, an invention she hadn't known she needed. But the relief lasted only minutes. Her phone lit up with a news alert. Board of Education requests information on Ridgewood Academy. After bias allegations. Then another. School board schedules emergency session to address Ridgewood complaints. Public comment invited. Kiana called, voice breathless. You seeing this? I'm seeing it. Are you going? Tanya looked at Malik, sprawled on the carpet, building a new model with toothpicks and quiet concentration. She thought of Alvarez, temporarily exiled for telling the truth. She thought of the emails with careful fonts and careless harm. She thought of Whitman, smiling while he wrote lane as a synonym for limit. Yes, she said. I'm going. She began to gather the papers. She chose the 5 that spoke the loudest: the override log, the training slide with outliers, the compliance email, Malik's raw scores, the expo's exoneration. Each sheet slid into a clear sleeve like armor. Her laptop pinged with one more message, from a board member she didn't know. Mrs. Robinson, for transparency, please note the emergency meeting will include discussion of leadership performance. You may wish to bring any relevant documentation. Leadership performance. The phrase was careful. The intent was not. Tanya closed the folder and stood. She felt the tremor in her knees and let it pass through instead of fighting it. Malik looked up at her, brow furrowed. You okay, Mom? I am, she said. We're crossing, that's all. He nodded, satisfied with an answer that sounded like him. As the late news teased the story, Ridgewood statement, the receipt site, parents planning to speak, a camera lingered on the school's gate. Light caught the crest, the ivy, the motto in Latin that had never included them. For once, the angle felt honest. It looked like what it was, a door that opened and closed on command. Tanya set her folder by the front door and laid her car keys on top. She turned off lights one by one, until only the kitchen lamp glowed. The apartment felt like a stage before the curtain rose. At 9:12 p.m. her phone buzzed with a final alert. School board emergency meeting. Tomorrow, 7:00 p.m. Public welcome. Agenda item 1. Allegations of discriminatory placement practices at Ridgewood Academy. The boardroom was already full when Tanya slipped into a seat near the aisle. The folder balanced on her knees, like a living thing. Parents packed the rows, some with arms folded across Ridgewood-branded fleeces, others clutching printed articles whose headlines still felt impossible. Cameras stared from the back wall, red lights blinking. A placard read, Emergency Session. Allegations of discriminatory placement practices. The board chair, a woman with soft gray hair and a voice tuned for order, tapped the mic. We will begin with public comment. Kiana went first, voice steady as she held up the Let Malik Build printouts. These are their words, she said, tapping the leaked slides. Maintain culture cohesion. Avoid destabilizing outliers. This isn't equity. It's containment dressed in Latin. A legacy father followed, face flushed. Ridgewood maintains standards, he insisted. It's what we donate for. Murmurs rippled. A teacher retired stood next. We used phrases like too intense for AP, when we meant doesn't match the brochure, she said quietly. We called it humane. Her eyes flicked to Tanya and didn't look away. When the chair called Tanya's name, the room seemed to tilt. She stood, spine straight, and walked to the mic. Malik's raw score sheets lay on top of the folder. Beneath them, the changelog with override General JB. Beneath that, Whitman's compliance email to the expo. My son won a statewide engineering competition, she began, voice even, after his school placed him in General Plus and told him to focus on sports. She looked at the board, then at the audience. I was told Ridgewood protects children. What I experienced felt like protection of something else entirely. She handed the chair 5 clear sleeves. Raw scores, manual override, training slides, a poster with his image posted without consent. And this, an email requesting the expo ensure adult assistance rules are enforced for my son's project, sent by Principal Whitman the morning after he won. A sharp intake of breath swept the room. The chair read, and lifted her head. Principal Whitman, did you send this email? Whitman seated 2 rows back with Elise from communications, and legal counsel at his shoulder, adjusted his cuff. Due diligence, he said smoothly. We support integrity across all venues. My inquiry had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with erasure, Tanya said, not into the mic but into the air. The chair rapped the gavel lightly. Thank you, Mrs. Robinson. She nodded to the next speaker. Halfway through the comment period, a figure slipped into the aisle. Ms. Alvarez, hair pulled back, An edge of worry folded into her posture. She waited, then stepped to the mic when called. "I teach math at Ridgewood," she said, voice low but clear. "I flagged Malik's performance as top quintile based on raw data. My notes were returned for calibration. I was asked to revise them to emphasize areas for growth, so the placement could remain in general." Her gaze moved to Whitman, and held. "I refused." She slid a paper to the chair. "The audit trail shows the override and the initials. Mine aren't on it." The boardroom turned electric. Elise leaned toward Whitman, whispering. He nodded once. Expression locked. When the gavel fell at last, the chair's tone had thickened. "We are opening a formal inquiry tonight," she said. "Effective immediately, we are placing Principal Edward Whitman on administrative leave pending investigation." A shard of silence, then scattered applause broke like hail. Some faces pinched, others released, as if a pressure they'd carried for years had finally been named out loud. Whitman rose, shook the counsel's hand, and walked out with his back tall and polished, the way some men do when they're already writing the next version of events. It moved quickly after that. The city paper's headline the next morning: "Board puts Ridgewood principal on leave." Amid bias probe was accompanied by a subhead that read, "Changelogs. Leaked slides raise questions over cohort equilibrium practices." Alumni split open across group chats. Donors hovered in careful silence, then began to pause gifts. By week's end, pressure had a weight you could feel in the hallway. At pickup, parents divided themselves in quiet ways, by which side of the walkway they took, by who made eye contact and who stared over heads at Ivy. One mother approached Tanya with eyes glassy. "I'm sorry," she said, as if the apology could travel backward in time. "I laughed at a meeting when they said science nights don't bring donors. That was small. I'm sorry." Tanya nodded, because there was no time for revenge in a place this fragile. Others doubled down in silence. A father in a varsity jacket brushed past her and muttered, "You'll ruin this school," as if the rot hadn't already been blooming under the stairs. The board's inquiry kept eating headlines. A television segment aired screenshots of the training slides. Someone had overlaid translations in plain speech. "Don't let certain kids in the advanced track, if their families aren't aligned." The segment cut to Malik tinkering with a new model. Then to Tanya, who chose her words like tools. "It's not just about my son," she said. "It's about systems that teach children to shrink. We build different systems. Or we build children who have to heal from us before they can build anything at all." Whitman resigned 2 days later. The statement read like Teflon. "After many years of service, Principal Whitman has decided to step aside to prevent distraction and allow the school to pursue its mission. He thanked the community and pledged to continue supporting education in other ways." There was a line about too much noise in a time of change. No fault admitted, no harm acknowledged. Tanya read it twice, then set it down like something you wash your hands after touching. Ms. Alvarez returned from her review to a quiet ovation from students who didn't know how else to say thank you. The board named an interim principal, Dr. Layla Chen, a former public school leader with a reputation for building inclusive advanced programs. On her first day, she walked the halls without a retinue, stopping to watch a cluster of 6th graders test a trebuchet in the courtyard. In the math wing, Alvarez posted a sign on the bulletin board: "Advanced Pathways, Open Review Sessions." Students lined up whose names had been missing from those flyers for years. Malik hovered at the door, then entered, shoulders looser than Tanya remembered seeing them since fall. Ridgewood sent a letter to families outlining policy shifts, raw score transparency, removal of community fit from placement criteria, opt-in media consent. The phrase cohort equilibrium vanished from official materials, an exorcism by font change. Malik changed in ways that were quieter than headlines. He started leaving his sketchbook open on his desk again. He raised his hand in class without watching the teacher's eyes first. He taught a neighbor's 4th grader how to build a bridge out of popsicle sticks that could hold a jar of pennies. When the jar didn't fall, the kid's joy spilled over so bright that Malik laughed out loud, a sound that had not been common in their apartment lately. "Feels different?" Tanya asked that night, leaning in the doorway as he resoldered a wire, tongue pressed against his lip in concentration. He nodded without looking up. "It feels like I don't have to prove I deserve air before I start breathing." She swallowed hard. "You never did." He set his tool down, wiped his hands on a towel, and glanced at her. "Can we help other kids?" he asked. "Like, maybe we make a club or something. Or a website. Not just let Malik build. Like, let us build." He winced. "That sounds corny." It sounds perfect, she said, the word catching. We'll build it. They did, on a borrowed domain and a basic layout. Parents uploaded documents, kids posted projects, volunteers offered tutoring, a retired engineer messaged to sponsor materials. Tanya watched comments collect from zip codes that had never seen the inside of Ridgewood. The site's front page held a sentence she and Malik wrote together. We're not asking for lanes. We're building roads. Not everyone sent warm notes. Anonymous emails still arrived like small stones through glass. Keep your head down. You got what you wanted. Stop. But they bounced harmlessly against something harder now. The fight had moved from survival to architecture. On a gray morning thick with the smell of impending rain, Malik ducked into the kitchen with a flyer. Dr. Chen wants me to apply to the Summer Engineering Institute, he said, eyes bright. Full scholarship. If I get in. When you get in, Tanya corrected, only half joking. He read the requirements like a recipe. Statement of purpose, portfolio, recommendation. He glanced up. From Ms. Alvarez. If she says yes, Tanya said. Alvarez did. The letter made Tanya cry at the sink, where a person can pretend to be cutting onions. Malik sees systems and refuses to accept their limits. He designs around walls. He collaborates by inviting others to stand on what he built. Recommend without reservation. Spring drifted into early summer, and then into the soft liturgy of endings. Yearbooks, assemblies, last day photos with arms thrown around friends, whose names would outlast homerooms. Ridgewood's gym hosted a community forum, where Dr. Chen laid out concrete changes and invited questions. Some parents stood, hesitant, and apologized to Tanya. Others packed up early and left with faces that had learned nothing. Tanya didn't chase anyone. She had work to do. The night before graduation, Malik laid out the simple black gown on his bed and set his cap on the chair, the tassel whispering at every movement. He checked the bridge model on his shelf, tapped the trophy like a superstition. Then he stood in the doorway of the living room, where Tanya sat collating final files for a meeting with a parent coalition from another school.
Mom?
She looked up. Thank you, he said, and the way he said it carried everything. The waiting, the documents, the long thin edge of not belonging, the morning he thought maybe he wasn't as smart as he'd hoped, the day his bridge lit up bulbs, and part of a room. She nodded, unable to speak around the sudden thickness in her throat. He crossed the room and put his chin on her shoulder like he had when he was small. She pressed her cheek to his hair and breathed. Graduation day arrived, sun-bright and almost unreal. Folding chairs stitched neat grids across the lawn, programs fluttered. A brass quintet warmed up near the steps. Tanya found a seat beside Kiana, who fanned herself with a water bill and whispered, "Look at us, people clapping for our babies." Say, Dr. Chen spoke first, brief and precise. Students filed past in a slow river of black gowns, tassels swinging like punctuation. Names rose and fell. When Tanya Robinson was called, Tanya rose to her feet without realizing it, hands clapping until they stung. Malik crossed the stage with measured stride, shook Dr. Chen's hand, accepted the diploma with the quick nod of a boy trying to stay composed while his life rearranged itself. Tanya brought a hand to her mouth to steady everything at once. The pride, the relief, the grief for what had almost been taken. She scanned the crowd, taking in the faces, fixing the moment the way you fix a frame. The flags along the fence snapped. A little kid in the row ahead kicked his legs in time with the band. And then beyond the rows of chairs, and the tent poles, and the bright prints of summer dresses, she saw him. At the edge of the lawn, just inside the shade thrown by the old oaks, stood Edward Whitman. No entourage, no microphone. His suit looked the same as ever. But something in his posture had softened or sagged. She couldn't tell. He watched the stage with a gaze that didn't blink at Malik's name. His expression was unreadable, carved down to something narrower than authority, broader than denial. Kiana leaned in, breath catching. "Is that—" "It is," Tanya said, voice a thread. Whitman didn't move. He stood like a man taking measure, as if the stage he used to control had rearranged itself in a geometry he could not adjust. As Malik took his seat, diploma in his hands, Whitman stepped out of the shade and started toward the crowd. Whitman stepped out of the shade as if crossing a border. He no longer controlled. The band's brass rose and fell. Tassels flicked in small gusts, and the lawn shimmered in summer heat that reminded Tanya of another day. The day the sun sat on her shoulders like a sentence while she waited outside his office for 2 hours. The same glare, The same hush inside her that used to mean stay small. Don't make it worse. Only this time, the chairs weren't empty and the doors weren't closed. 1,000 eyes faced the stage, and the entire auditorium was not waiting on a principal's availability. They were waiting on Malik. Kiana pressed a hand to Tanya's arm. You don't have to talk to him, she murmured. I know, Tanya said, though her breath caught when Whitman drew nearer, careful not to brush too close to anyone who might know his name, the way headlines now carried it. He stopped 2 rows away, scanning the stage where Dr. Chen shook hands with graduates, whose names became a canopy of applause. Malik Robinson, the marshal called again, this time several rows ahead, honor cords catching sunlight. Malik looked briefly toward the crowd as if locating the anchor he always used, found Tanya and lifted his chin the smallest degree. She nodded back, a code they'd built out of all the waiting. I see you, cross. He mounted the steps, accepted his diploma, and then paused at the lectern, because a staffer touched his elbow and whispered. Dr. Chen stepped forward smiling toward the audience. We have one more recognition, she said, and the chatter dimmed. As many of you know, our graduating class includes a student whose engineering design earned first place at the State Youth Expo this year. In his honor, and with support from community partners, we're pleased to announce a new award, the Open Bridges Scholarship, full support for 4 years at the recipient's engineering program, plus a summer stipend for community design projects. She turned to Malik. The inaugural Open Bridges scholar is Malik Robinson. The lawn seemed to shift under Tanya's feet, then level into stillness as applause rose. Unsure then sure, parents standing, students whistling, faculty clapping with the relief of a future that might be different if they kept their hands moving long enough. Tanya pressed her fingers to her mouth. She hadn't known about the name. She hadn't known about the summer stipend. She only knew the sound the crowd made felt like doors opening. Malik's eyes shone. He took the certificate from Dr. Chen, who leaned close to say something only he could hear. He nodded, then turned to the mic, fingers gripping its edge as if it were another beam needing his balance. I want to thank my mom, he said, voice steadying after the first word. A ripple of laughter, gentle, he breathed. And my teachers who saw me, and the kids who asked me to explain triangles. He looked over the crowd, not searching now but offering. I built a bridge, because I wanted people to get across. That's all I want to keep doing. Tanya heard a chair creak quietly behind her. Whitman sitting. The movement surprised her more than if he had left. He remained still, hands folded, face unreadable. She remembered his office, the polished desk, the way the word fit had felt like a velvet-covered door, then forced the image to release her. The boy at the microphone belonged to no one's doorframe. On the far aisle, Ms. Alvarez stood half hidden by a column, tears bright as she clapped. When Malik stepped off stage, he bent to hug her quickly, as if it were part of the choreography, and the crowd made the sound people make when they recognize a thread they'd only just noticed running through the whole fabric. Programs fluttered, as names continued. When the recessional music finally swelled, families spilled onto the lawn in a drift of congratulations and cameras. Tanya gathered herself like a person stepping into waist-deep water and moved toward the aisle. Around her, parents who had once looked straight past her now touched her elbow, squeezed her shoulder, whispered, I'm sorry, thank you, he earned it. She nodded to each. There was tenderness in her, and also a ledger. Both could exist. Whitman came to a stop before her. For a long breath, neither of them spoke. The oaks above rustled as if even the trees didn't want to miss a line. Mrs. Robinson, he said finally. Mr. Whitman, she returned, and the names sounded like what they were, titles without weight in the space between them. He looked over her shoulder to the stage, then back. Congratulations, he said, and this time the word carried no blade. Your son is remarkable. He always was, Tanya said. A smile ghosted and failed. He cleared his throat. I doubt I have a right to ask anything of you, he said carefully, but if I may, there were pressures. I believed I was protecting a system that knew better than any one person. I was wrong about what it knew. His gaze steadied on hers. I don't expect absolution, but I would like to say that to you. The unexpectedness of it knocked against her ribs. She'd rehearsed refusals, not this small human admission. She measured it and laid it down where it belonged, not as a rewrite, not as a redemption, as a fragment of truth placed among many. I appreciate hearing it, she said. The harm happened anyway. Yes, he said quietly. He glanced toward Malik, who was surrounded by classmates, a boy with a camera angling for light. I sent a letter to the scholarship board this morning. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Offered it and then, thinking better of the theater of it, lowered his hand. For their files. I finally signed the recommendation I should have signed months ago. He tried to smile. It won't matter now, but it will exist. Tanya let the moment breathe and pass. What you choose next will matter more, she said. Wherever you go. He nodded once, as if he'd expected worse, and found something heavier. Goodbye, Mrs. Robinson. He turned and moved back through the crowd, a man threaded among families that would tell this day long after his name softened to a footnote. Kiana exhaled. Well, she said, blinking hard. That was a plot twist. Not the one I needed, Tanya said softly, but maybe one somebody else will. Ms. Alvarez reached them, hair windswept, eyes still wet. I can't stop crying, she said, laughing once at herself. Dr. Chen told me the donors who used to fund Ridgewood's legacy gala redirected the money to the Open Bridges Fund, permanently. That's the right legacy, Tanya said, and she meant more than the money. Malik found them then, cap tilted back, diploma tucked under his arm like a secret he couldn't keep. He folded himself into Tanya the way boys do at certain thresholds. Half grown, wholly theirs for a second longer. We did it, he whispered. She put her mouth near his ear and answered the promise she had made to herself when sweat slid down her back outside an office door. Never again will they make us wait outside. He drew back enough to see her, and whatever he read in her face steadied him in a way applause never could. A reporter hovered, edged forward, then thought better of it and retreated. The story could wait. Dr. Chen threaded through the knots of people, clipboard tucked under one arm, competence and warmth walking in the same body. Tanya, she said, the institute director is here. He'd like to meet Malik, and for what it's worth, the board voted this morning to remove community fit from all placement criteria, retroactively. Every student will be reevaluated by raw data and teacher expertise, not optics. She glanced at Ms. Alvarez, who nodded once, a clean, satisfied movement. Thank you, Tanya said. Thank you, Dr. Chen replied, for making it unavoidable. She moved on. Malik watched her go. Mom, he said. Can I say something at dinner? Like a toast? You can say anything you want, Tanya answered. They took pictures, Malik with Kiana, with Ms. Alvarez, with classmates who had learned to stand next to him without making him smaller. Little kids ran in the aisles. Somebody's granddad dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief he pretended was for allergies. The lawn felt for a breath, like a place that might remember. On the way out they passed the gym where months earlier, a poster had carried Malik's sprinting face, without consent. The wall was blank now, but a different banner hung from the railing. Advanced Pathways Showcase. All welcome. Beneath it someone had taped a handmade sign in marker. Build what they said you couldn't. Malik paused and traced a letter with one finger, then let his hand fall. In the car the scholarship folder sat between them like a quiet sun. Traffic peeled away in a kind of choreography. Malik stared out the window, then turned. Do you think it's over? He asked. Tanya considered. She thought of other hallways, other desks, other secret changelogs, and phrases like doors disguised as compliments. She shook her head once, not unkindly. No, she said. But we found a way through, and now we know where to push. He nodded, as if that was better than any ending. Can we keep the site going? He asked. The one for other kids. Maybe we do a summer build, like little bridges. Not metaphors, the real thing. Then we send them to the neighborhoods that flood when it rains. Like actual help. Actual help, Tanya repeated. And the phrase felt like an address. Yes. That evening, the apartment filled with the low clatter of plates, and the gentle cacophony of people who had stayed. Kiana with peach cobbler, Ms. Alvarez carrying a stack of disposable cameras she insisted on using, Malik arranging his model in the center of the table, like an altar to a different kind of worship. They ate, they laughed, they left some silence for the names that had made the fight possible, and the names they didn't know yet. When it got quiet, Malik stood, cleared his throat, and lifted a glass of ginger ale. To bridges, he said, shy but sure. The kind we build with our hands, and the kind we build when we refuse to be small. He looked at Tanya, and to my mom who didn't let a door become a wall. They clinked, small sounds that traveled further than rooms usually allow. Later, when the dishes were done, and the house was a scattering of late light and tired contentment, Tanya stepped to the window. The city hummed. Somewhere, A siren rose and fell. Somewhere else, a child stood outside a closed office, holding a parent's hand, while the clock practiced indifference. Tanya touched the glass, as if she might press instructions into it. Tell them to bring a notebook. Tell them not to apologize for wanting the door to open. Behind her, Malik set the scholarship letter on the coffee table and lined up his pencils beside it, like he was already measuring the next thing. She watched him and felt the same quiet certainty that had carried her through hallways and emails, and rooms where people had laughed at science nights. It wasn't victory. It was velocity. It wasn't the end of a fight. It was the start of a practice. Kiana texted a link. An article about a different school. A different family. Familiar language. You see this? Tanya typed back. I do. Send them our site. A minute later. Done. Already in their DM. She smiled and spoke to the room. To herself. To the days ahead. Never again will they make us wait outside. The night held, then softened. Malik yawned, set his cap on the chair back, and flicked off the lamp beside the model bridge. In the dim, the tiny bulbs he'd wired months ago glowed faintly from leftover charge. A ghost of light that refused to learn the meaning of off. Tanya stood a little longer, not to guard anything but to honor it. Before she finally turned away, she let the last line rise and settle where it could do its work. On her tongue, in her chest, and if the story did what it was supposed to do, in the rooms where strangers would hear it and make decisions. Then, like all good questions, she sent it out without an answer. How many other Maliks are still being kept outside the doors of opportunity? No child should ever have to fight this hard just to be seen for who they are. Tanya's struggle was for Malik, but her question belongs to all of us. If you believe every child deserves a fair chance, type yes in the comments. And if this story broke your heart, subscribe so their voices are never silenced again.